Throughout history, humans have left behind signs of their existence that still baffle us. Think of enormous stone structures built with unbelievable precision or ancient artifacts that seem way ahead of their time. These archaeological puzzles keep researchers scratching their heads. From the ancient temples in Turkey to sunken ruins off the coast of Japan, from unreadable manuscripts to precisely crafted stones that modern tech can't recreate. These mysteries challenge everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. Now, picture a dusty report from 1963 just sitting in a drawer. It talks about broken limestone slabs scattered across what looked like an old cemetery on a hill in southeastern Turkey. For 30 years, nobody even thought about it. Then, in 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt decided to check out that forgotten hill. Schmidt wasn't your average archaeologist. He had a lot of experience with Neolithic sites. And something about that brief report didn't sit right with him. After all, medieval cemeteries usually didn't have big stone slabs way up high. When he got to the site called Göbekli Tepe, or Belly Hill in Turkish, he immediately noticed things others had overlooked. A hill shot up 50 feet above the land around it. Its shape was too perfect, too symmetrical to be natural. Schmidt took a closer look at the limestone bits that previous researchers had thought were just grave markers. But these weren't random stones. They were carved, and they were huge. Much bigger than anything you'd find in a medieval graveyard. Turning in 1995 with a small team, they quickly discovered something incredible. Those limestone pieces are actually parts of giant T-shaped pillars each, standing 16 feet tall and weighing up to 10 tons. They were arranged in careful circles, making what looks like the oldest known temple complex in the world. The dating result shocked the archaeological world. Göbekli Tepe turned out to be about 11,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Egyptian pyramids by 6,500 years. This was a monument from civilization's very beginning, created by people who didn't seem to have the resources or skills for such a huge project. As the digging went on, the true scale of their achievements became even clearer. The layout of the site began to take shape. Ground-penetrating radar showed at least 16 stone circles spread across 22 acres. The team had only dug up less than 5% of the whole area. Each circle had a similar design, 2 big central pillars surrounded by smaller ones in a ring, all made from limestone taken straight from the hillside. What stood out most was what was missing. There were no cooking fires, no homes, no trash heaps, none of the usual markers of a permanent settlement. Instead, archaeologists found over 100,000 animal bones, all from wild species. Gazelles made up about 60% of the remains, along with wild boar, sheep, red deer, and various birds, including vultures and cranes. This evidence told a clear story. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, not farmers. Agriculture wasn't a thing yet. The fact that nomadic groups could gather hundreds of workers to quarry, transport, and set up these massive stones turned previous ideas about early human societies on their heads. The stone pillars shared an even more fascinating tale. Many were adorned with detailed carvings of animals, but not the gentle ones you'd usually see in art. Instead, these pillars depicted a world of fierce predators. Lions prowled on the surfaces, scorpions raised their stingers, vultures spread their wings, spiders crawled along the edges. These were the creatures that posed threats to hunter-gatherers, the ones that lurked in the shadows. Vultures caught the researchers' attention. Those carrion birds appeared often in the carvings, usually in key positions. Throughout history, many cultures have seen vultures as psychopods, guides for souls to the afterlife. The prominence of vulture imagery hinted that Göbekli Tepe might have been a hub for death rituals or ancestor worship. New discoveries continue to deepen the mystery. In 2020, excavators found a life-size sculpture of a wild boar carved from limestone. The detail was stunning, showing artistic talent that measured up to much later civilizations. Additionally, they uncovered bits of human bone mixed in with the dirt between the circles, backing up theories about the site's connection to burial practices. But maybe the most baffling find was what the builders did after finishing each circle. To keep their monuments intact, they purposefully buried them under layers of dirt and debris. Then they constructed new circles on top of those, creating a history of building and burying that spanned centuries. This cycle hints at a complicated ritual that archaeologists still can't fully grasp. The whole construction process raises some pretty big questions. Moving those enormous stones needed a lot of know-how in leverage, transportation, and engineering, especially since all the work was done using stone tools. With no metal in sight, they had to quarry limestone, shape it just right, transport it across the site, and set it up in perfect circles. This organization points to social structures that seemed unlikely for nomadic people. Typically, it was believed that complex societies popped up only after agriculture helped provide food surpluses and stable living situations for building monumental sites. But Gebsepi flips this idea on its head. What if the push to create something sacred actually sparked the need for agriculture and complex societies? Perhaps religion came first, then farming followed to support the growing communities around those religious sites. The timing backs this groundbreaking idea. Gobishi was built during humanity's shift from hunting and gathering to farming. Archaeological findings from nearby places show that within 1,000 years of the temple's creation, locals had domesticated sheep, cattle, and pigs. And just 20 meters away, geneticists unearthed evidence of the world's oldest domesticated wheat, dating back about 10,500 years. Quote, modern analysis continues to reveal more insights. Advanced dating methods suggest some aspects of the site might actually be older than first believed, up to 15,000 years old. Earthquakes in 2023 that hit the area unexpectedly opened up new research chances, highlighting how the ancient builders designed their structures to endure seismic activity. However, the symbolic language of Göbekli remains mostly a mystery. There's a daunting gap of 6,000 years between these ancient builders and the earliest written record. Without written proof, researchers rely on what they discover through archaeology and comparative analysis to decipher the meanings behind the symbols. Some theorize that the animal carvings might represent constellations, effectively turning the stone circles into astronomical calendars. Some people think these sites tell stories about how humans relate to nature. Others argue they are markers for different groups that helped build the monument. The spot was chosen carefully. Standing at Göbekli, you can see for miles in every direction. 11,000 years ago, this view would have looked very different. Instead of fields, the builders would have seen rivers, wild animals roaming, and forests filled with fruit and nut trees. They had a clear view of the paths animals and people took through the land. Today, new teams of archaeologists are digging deeper into his mystery, picking up where Schmidt left off when he passed away in 2014. Every season brings fresh findings that piece together the story and spark new questions. Recently, they've uncovered signs of advanced water systems and stone channels that hint at a longer occupation than we believed. But many key questions still linger. How did these hunter-gatherer communities organize such massive workforces? What rituals unfolded inside those stone circles? Why bury their monuments instead of keeping them in plain sight? And most intriguingly, how does this ancient site tie into the rise of agriculture that would reshape human life? Great Pyramids of Giza stand tall, and one question overshadows all others. How were they built? Over 4,500 years, this structure has puzzled us, not just because of its size. Sure, at 481 feet tall and made of over 2.3 million stone blocks, it's impressive. But the real mystery lies in the precision and engineering feats the ancient Egyptians achieved with just Bronze Age tools. Some blocks weigh as much as 70 tons, yet they fit together with such accuracy that even modern engineers find it hard to replicate. The base is almost a perfect square, differing by less than 2 inches on any side. The internal chambers connect through passages aligned with celestial events. Hidden within this enormous structure of voids that archaeologists can't yet explain. The central question that has baffled researchers for centuries remains simple. How did workers manage to move and position those enormous stone blocks without any advanced machines? There's a lot of theories out there, each with its own interesting points, but also some gaps. The straight ramp theory is the classic explanation. It suggests that the ancient Egyptians created huge ramps in the base of the pyramid, all the way to the top. This way, workers could pull the stones up at a high temperature. Gentle slope. Supporters mention archaeological findings of ramps near other pyramids, and some limestone ramp remains at various sites. The math backs this up too. A ramp sloping at about 5 dg would need to stretch over 3 meters to reach the pyramid's peak. While it's a big task, it's within reach for a civilization that gathered thousands of workers for projects that lasted decades. Hieroglyphs talk about huge teams, quarrying stone, building infrastructure, and moving materials across Egypt. But there are significant challenges with this straight ramp theory. Archaeological studies around the Great Pyramid haven't found evidence of these massive ramps. The amount of material it would require could actually be more than what's in the pyramid itself. Plus, as the pyramid got taller, the ramp would have to be rebuilt all the time, taking up even more labor and resources. Then there's the spiral ramp theory, which tries to address these issues by wrapping the ramp around the outside of the pyramid. Its design would need much less material and could be constructed progressively as the pyramid was built. French architect Jean-Pierre Houder figured out that a spiral ramp sloping at 8.5 deg could reach the top while using only a fraction of what the straight ramp would need. There's some physical evidence that backs this theory too. Satellite images seem to show spiral patterns on the pyramid surfaces, possibly left over from ancient ramps. Plus, that spiral design could explain how the workers moved those huge granite blocks used in the king's chamber without needing giant turning spaces. But the spiral ramp theory hits some bumps when it comes to the pyramid's corners. The sharp turns at the corners would make it really tough to drag those heavy blocks around. Quote, not to mention, the ramp would block access to the pyramid sides, making it hard to place the carefully cut inkstones that originally covered the entire pyramid. The internal ramp, Houdan's theory suggests that after the first part of the pyramid was built using ramps on the outside, construction moved to ramps inside the pyramid. This means the workers could carve out galleries and ramps inside, letting them move stones up without needing anything on the outside. Some intriguing findings have backed this idea. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project used a technique called cosmic ray muon tomography and found a big empty space above the Grand Gallery. This space is about 100 feet long and 25 feet high, just like the internal ramp theory predicted. Additionally, ground-penetrating radar has picked up what seems to be hidden passages inside the pyramid that you can't see from the outside. The internal ramp theory also helps explain some of the puzzling aspects of the pyramid's design. For instance, the unusual shape of the Grand Gallery. Its ceiling could have supported a smart system for lifting stones. Mysterious shafts from the King and Queen's chambers might have acted as ventilation for workers inside. Even the unfinished chamber underground could show that construction was paused to work on the internal design. However, there are challenges with this theory. Creating internal ramps would mean digging out a lot of stone from the inside, which could weaken the structure. Plus, it would take advanced engineering to make sure the internal spaces wouldn't compromise the pyramid's stability. There are no Egyptian texts that mention such complex methods of building inside. On the other hand, the water shaft theory offers a completely different perspective. This idea suggests that ancient Egyptians might have floated heavy stones to higher levels using water-filled shafts. Supporters of this theory point out the pyramid's location near the Nile and the advanced water management systems found elsewhere in Egypt. Signs of water use, like boat pits around the pyramid and possible water channels nearby, add weight as possibility. It's suggested that workers could have used wooden floats and water-filled shafts to make heavy stones lighter, allowing them to move them up more easily. But this theory also runs into practical issues. The internal chambers of the pyramid show no signs of water damage or the minerals you'd expect from such a process. Heavy rainfall led to deposits in the area. The way the stones fit together hints at dry construction methods. What's crucial here is that the theory depends on water pressure systems that seem beyond what the Egyptians could handle. Advances in technology have breathed new life into these discussions. The Scan Pyramids project has found several hidden voids inside the pyramid using non-invasive scanning. In 2023, researchers confirmed a 30-foot corridor near the north side of the pyramid, identified through cosmic ray muon tomography. These findings support ideas about how the pyramid was built, but also spark new questions. The large void above the Grand Gallery seems to be a space intentionally created, not a construction accident. Its size and position hint that it had a specific purpose, possibly tied to building the pyramid or its role as a tomb. Corridor found in 2023 could be part of an internal ramp system, aligning with Houdan's theory. Still, we don't know exactly what it was meant for, as it doesn't connect to any known chambers, and its direction doesn't follow the usual patterns for ramps or burial sites. Modern engineering studies show just how complex the pyramid's construction really was. The huge granite beams in the king's chamber weigh up to 70 tons and were cut and placed with stunning accuracy. Relieving chambers above the king's chamber use a clef design with interlocking blocks to manage weight and avoid collapse. The accuracy of the stonework reflects a deep understanding of geometry, astronomy, and engineering. The pyramid's base is aligned with the cardinal directions within just 1/5 of a degree, and the internal pathways are oriented toward particular stars and constellations. The overall size and shape of the pyramid showcase mathematical relationships that wouldn't be formally recognized until much later. Yet, this advanced construction was done with tools that seem pretty primitive for such a massive undertaking. Archaeological finds suggest that Egyptian workers relied on copper chisels, wooden levers, and rope systems to cut and move those enormous stones. While those tools were effective, They demanded a lot of human effort and careful organization to pull off the construction of the pyramid. The question of the workforce just adds to the complexity. Estimates usually say between 20,000 to 30,000 people were involved. Workers toiled on the pyramid for more than 20 years. They needed food, shelter, and organization. Recent finds of worker villages close to the pyramid show massive efforts, including bakeries, breweries, and medical care. The social setup needed for building the pyramid might be the most remarkable part of the whole theory. Think about it, coordinating thousands of workers and managing supplies over decades required management systems that could rival today's project management. Each theory about how the pyramid was built has some truth, but they all face major challenges. Straight ramp theory explains the basics but doesn't have enough archaeological backing. The spiral ramp idea tackles material issues but has a tough time with real-life logistics. Internal ramp theory lines up with new discoveries but needs some super advanced engineering know-how. The water shaft hierarchy brings in some cool solutions but doesn't match up with physical evidence. Maybe the best explanation pulls bits from various theories. It's likely that different methods were used at different times, starting with outside ramps for the base and switching to internal systems for the upper parts. The recently uncovered voids might hint at various stages of construction, each using the best techniques for its unique challenges. Now let's talk about Stonehenge in England. If you stroll into a bookstore, you'll find tons of books trying to unlock its true purpose. Some say ancient aliens made it as a landing spot. Others think druids used it for sacrifices. It's been called a giant calendar, a healing center, or even a gateway to other worlds. Hollywood's had its fun too, featuring it in horror flicks and fantasy stories. The History Channel's Ancient Aliens has dedicated whole episodes to wild extraterrestrial theories. Many, Stonehenge stands as the ultimate ancient mystery, so baffling that only supernatural explanations seem fitting. This fascination isn't new. It started way before modern media. In the 1600s, a guy named John Aubrey first claimed druids built it. By the 1700s, William Stoutley had taken this further, spinning tales of grand druid ceremonies and human sacrifices among the stones. The Romantic movement. In the 1800s, people were captivated by dramatic stories, turning Stonehenge into a symbol of ancient wisdom and mystical powers. Quote, then came the 20th century with even wilder theories. In 1965, astronomer Gerald Hawkins published Stonehenge Decoded, suggesting that the monument was actually a high-tech computer for predicting eclipses. This idea took off in popular culture, leading to tons of books, documentaries, and movies about ancient astronomical knowledge. The 1960s saw the New Age movement grow, bringing beliefs in healing crystals, kind of slow-paced, many thinking they're taking part in ancient rituals. Neo-Dais hold ceremonies, crystal healers claim to channel energy from the stones, and conspiracy theorists hunt for signs of alien technology. It's turned into a pilgrimage site for those wanting a link to mysterious ancient forces. But what do the archaeological findings really say about Stonehenge? Truth is even more complex and fascinating than any made-up story. Modern archaeology shows that Stonehenge was built in 5 stages over about 1500 BCE to 1600 BCE to 1600 BCE. What we see today is just a final phase. Originally, it started as a simple circular earthwork with wooden posts. First phase, around 3100 BCE, featured a circular bank and ditch with 56 holes along the edge. These Aubrey holes, named after John Aubrey, once held wooden posts. Excavations revealed that many had cremated human remains, making this version of Stonehenge a cemetery, not a temple. Then, around 2600 BCE, builders began the second phase, switching from wood to stone. They set about 80 blue stones in 2 rings, weighing around 4 tons each. These stones came all the way from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away. Recent digs pinpointed the exact quarries where they were taken from, showing just how much effort went into transporting them. The huge sarsen stones we're familiar with today were put up around 2500 BCE during the third phase. Massive stones, some weighing up to 50 tons, were dragged from the Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles north. Builders crafted the stones using only stone hammers, making the precise joints that hold everything together. Originally, the Sassen Circle had 30 upright stones with a continuous ring of horizontal lintels on top. Inside that circle, they constructed Tylithon's 5 huge doorways made of 2 upright stones topped by a lintel. The tallest trilithon reached 24 feet high and weighed over 100 tons. Craftsmanship is so precise it rivals anything later civilizations managed, even back in the Bronze Age. Radiocarbon dating has smoothed away many myths about who built Stonehenge. The monument was pretty much complete by 2000 BCE, well over 1,000 years before the Celts, who later created the Druids, even appeared. Real builders were people from the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, their DNA showing connections to early farmers who migrated from places like Anatolia and the Iberian Peninsula. They weren't primitive hunter-gatherers. Evidence nearby points to a complex society with deep knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and logistics. Nearby, the Darrington Wall settlement had thousands living there while Stonehenge went up, with signs of feasting, crafting, and social structure. The astronomical setups at Stonehenge are genuine, but they're simpler than some folks claim. The monument points to the sunrise on the summer solstice and sunset on the winter solstice. From the circle's center, the sun rises right above the heel stone on the longest day of the year. This alignment was clearly planned, but you don't need advanced math, just careful watching of the sun's path each year. Claims of Stonehenge being a complicated astronomical tool have been proven wrong. While it does align with some lunar and stellar positions, those alignments are either coincidences or just basic solar setups. The idea that it could predict eclipses hundreds of years ahead has no archaeological backing. As for the supposed healing powers of Stonehenge, they do have archaeological roots, though not in the way New Age believers often think. Chemical tests on the blue stones show they came from sacred springs in Wales valued by PRA. Historic people. Some of the ashes found at the site suggest that people brought their sick loved ones to the monument in hopes of healing. But this healing probably came through rituals and ceremonies, not some mystical forces. The unique sounds in the stone circle make voices and music resonate in ways we don't usually hear. This acoustic effect likely deepened the experience of those ceremonies, allowing participants to feel something beyond the ordinary. To truly understand Stonehenge, we need to look at it in the context of its surroundings. Wide prehistoric area that includes burial mounds, ceremonial paths, and other stone circles. This was a sacred space where people gathered for significant rituals over many years. Building Stonehenge took a considerable investment, showing just how important it was to those who created it. Transporting the blue stones all the way from Wales was an incredible feat, requiring thousands of people working tirelessly for decades. This hints at the monument's importance, stretching far beyond just one community. 2020, archaeologists uncovered a circle of large pits around Stonehenge. Each pit is perfectly placed to form a circle over a mile wide, dating back to the same era as the monument. This suggests that the sacred landscape was more complex than we once thought. The myths about Stonehenge show us something deep about human nature. We often want to believe that ancient people had secret knowledge or supernatural abilities. But the truth is, Bronze Age farmers built this incredible monument through careful planning, hard work, and a rich understanding of their world. That seems less thrilling than tales of aliens or magic. Yet, the reality is far more inspiring than any story. Stonehenge stands as one of humanity's first efforts to create something lasting, a link between the future and the cosmos, as well as their ancestors. The builders achieved something beyond their imaginations, crafting a structure that continues to attract people from all over the globe, all in search of a connection to something bigger than themselves. When archaeologist Alexa Verenish first pointed his laser scanner at the scattered stone blocks of Pumapunku, he thought he was just documenting another ruined temple. But what the scans revealed flipped the script on what scientists believed about Bronze Age engineering. The findings showed cuts so precise they matched modern machinery, with joints so tightly fitted you couldn't slide even a piece of paper between them. Since the 1990s, researchers have been digging deeper, using all sorts of high-tech methods to figure out how the ancient builders of Tiwanaku managed to create these incredible stone structures. They've used everything from electron microscopy to 3D laser scanning, uncovering details that are invisible to the naked eye. And this ongoing investigation raises big questions for engineers and archaeologists today. It all started with basic measurements. Researchers discovered that many stone blocks at Pumapunku were cut with intolerances of less than 1 millimeter. Those famous H-shaped blocks, each weighing up to 600 kilograms, fit together with such precision that you couldn't slip anything between the joints. Achieving this kind of accuracy takes more than just skilled hands. It requires a deep understanding of geometry and measurement. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a lot about what lies beneath centuries of soil and debris. It showed that the original Pumapunku covered over 20 acres with multiple terrace platforms, While the well-known stone blocks are just a small part of the whole site, crazy radar also uncovered many buried structures and artifacts that have guided further digs. Petrographic analysis of the stone samples gave key insights into how the builders worked. Researchers looked closely at thin sections of the andesite blocks under electron microscopy, examining their mineral makeup and crystal structures. What they found were tool marks that you'd miss if you weren't looking closely, along with patterns and textures that pointed to specific cutting techniques and processes. Microscopic evidence suggests that the builders used a mix of methods to shape the stone. The initial rough shaping was done through controlled fracturing, taking advantage of the rock's natural grain and weak points. Final shaping meant grinding and polishing with tougher materials, probably quartz sand mixed with water. Tool marks show they used copper tools, and evidence backs this up from the Tiwanaku civilization. Researchers used photogrammetry and 3D modeling to create accurate digital models of the scattered blocks. By measuring every angle and surface with millimeter precision, they tried to virtually piece together the original structures. They discovered many blocks were cut to interlock, like a three-dimensional puzzle that only fits together in one way. The tightness of these joints is a real mystery. Today's stonemasons find it hard to match that kind of precision, even with power tools and laser measurements. Yet, the Tiwanaku achieved this using just copper chisels, stone hammers, and measuring tools that left no evidence behind. The goal was to understand not just the cutting technique, but how they kept that high level of accuracy across hundreds of blocks. Experimental archaeology shed some light on this. Researchers tried to replicate the stonework at Pumapunku using only the tools that the ancient builders had. They found that copper tools could indeed make cuts and alignments, but it was a labour-intensive process taking a lot of time and skilled hands. Shaping just one H-block would take multiple craftsmen working for months. Our experiments also showed just how refined the builders' techniques were. To achieve the precision found at Pumapunku, they needed more than just good tools. They required systematic ways to measure, mark cutting lines, and check accuracy as they worked. Chemical analysis of the stone surfaces offered more clues. X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy identified trace elements that pointed to the sources of raw materials. The Anderite stones came from quarries across Lake Titicaca, which meant transporting huge blocks over tough terrain. Quote, "The red sandstone used for the platforms was from closer sites, but still needed careful selection and transport. Recent studies with advanced imaging techniques have uncovered details about the construction process that were previously unknown. High-resolution photography, taken in controlled lighting, uncovered faint tool marks and building sequences that you can't see normally. These discoveries showed that the builders had a systematic approach, finishing each stone to exact specifications before starting on the next. They also used sound analysis to get a grip on how the site interacts with sound. Researchers found that the way the stones were arranged created unique acoustic effects, with sounds bouncing around in specific ways. This might have been by design, but it also gave hints about how the original architecture was set up. Using advanced simulations, experts tested different ideas about how the building was originally structured. The results pointed out that the scattered stones could form stable structures, but they had to be arranged just right. This helped to identify which stones fit together and how the original buildings might have looked. The results consistently showed a level of skill that goes against AIW. We usually think about Bronze Age capabilities, the precision in stone cutting, the complexity of how the stones fit together, and the vast scale of the project all suggested a high level of engineering expertise and organised effort. However, the study also highlighted some limits in the builders' technology. Even with all their impressive achievements, the builders at Pumapunku were working within certain constraints. They didn't use any metal tougher than copper, relied only on simple tools like levers and ramps, and transported materials primarily with human labour, possibly aided by llamas. Research also brought to light the difficulties in studying damaged archaeological sites. Years of looting, weathering, and modern disruptions had jumbled the original layout beyond recognition. Even with sophisticated methods, researchers could just piece together bits of what the builders originally intended. Test different theories, controlled excavations were essential. Small digs in untouched areas confirmed the existence of more stone blocks and architectural features that the remote sensing surveys had predicted. The discoveries confirmed the scientific methods and uncovered more layers of the site's complexity. Growing body of evidence showcased impressive ancient engineering, but also revealed significant gaps in what we truly understand. Researchers could recognize the achievements of the Tiwanaku builders, yet the exact techniques they used to attain such precision remained partly unclear. The lack of detailed tool marks, measuring devices, or blueprints left key elements of their methods open to interpretation. New non-destructive analysis techniques have been shedding light on Pumapunku's construction. Recent CT scans of selected stones have unveiled internal structures and possible flaws that are hidden from the outside. These methods let researchers explore the stone's inner makeup without harming these priceless artifacts. In the year 1438, in Saxuan, Peru, a young Inca prince named Cusi Yapanqui faced his greatest threat. Enemy warriors from the Chanca tribe had surrounded Cusco, which was the heart of the small Inca kingdom. Most of the royal family had retreated to the mountains, leaving the city vulnerable. But Cusi Yapanqui, who would later be called Pachacuti, meaning Earthshaker, had a vision that would change not just his destiny, but the entire landscape of South America. After emerging victorious from a desperate battle, he set to work on the most ambitious building project the Andes had ever seen. People planned to transform Cusco into the center of the world. I had this idea of, at the heart of this new capital would stand a fortress so grand that it would serve as both a military base and a sacred temple. This fortress would be called Sakai Waman, translating to satisfied falcon in Quechua. The Inca Empire in the 15th century was truly unique. In under a century, it would expand from a small kingdom around Cusco into an empire spanning over 2,500 miles from Ecuador to Chile. At its peak, Tuantin-Suyu, as the Incas referred to their domain, ruled over 12 million people speaking many different languages. Yet, it wasn't just sheer military power that held this vast empire together. It relied on a complex system of administration, engineering, and religious beliefs, all centered around the divine authority of the Sapa Inca. Pachacuti realized that ruling such a vast empire meant more than just taking it over. He needed to show that the Incare reign was here to stay and had divine approval. To do this, he planned impressive monuments that would endure through time. He thought about man as the perfect symbol of this power, visible from all around Cusco and beyond. This fortress would not only protect the capital, but also serve as a central place for important religious ceremonies. Construction kicked off around 1438 and went on for over 90 years, stretching across the reign of several Inca leaders. Historical records tell us that more than 20,000 men were involved in building it, coming from all parts of the expanding empire. The Spanish historian Pedro Tita Leon, who visited the site in 1553, noted how the Incas organized these workers into shifts. Some quarried stones, others moved them, and many shaped and fit the huge blocks together. Intrigue of Sacsayhuaman lies not just in how it was built, but also in its role in the larger story of Andean civilization. When the Spanish conquistadors laid eyes on the fortress in 1533, forced them to rethink what they believed about the capabilities of so-called primitive peoples. The massive walls, made without mortar, held stones weighing up to 300 tons, all fitted together with such skill that you couldn't even slide a knife between them. But Sacsayhuaman didn't come about out of nowhere. It was the peak of architectural knowledge that had developed over 1,000 years in the Andes. And Andes was. The Incas took the techniques honed by earlier cultures like the Wari and Tiwanaku and made them even better. Recent archaeological findings hint that the Quilchi culture might have used this area as far back as 1100 CE, with the Incas building on and expanding what they found. The design of the fortress mirrors the Inca belief that Cusco was the center of the universe. The city was shaped like a puma, with Sacsayhuaman symbolizing the head of this sacred creature. The three large zigzag walls still dominating the site were said to represent the teeth of the puma. The entire complex acted as a bridge between the earthly world and the divine. Chroniclers like Inca Garcilas de Vega, who had both Spanish and Inca heritage, this connection. The Incas had unique ways of building. They didn't use modern vehicles or iron tools. Instead, they relied on human effort, copper tools, and a clever grasp of engineering to move massive stones across tough landscapes. Sacsayhuaman isn't just known for its impressive structure. It played a key role in the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire. Back in 1536, during the major rebellion led by Manco Inca, this fortress became the heart of resistance. For months, Inca warriors defended their stronghold against Spanish troops, using the fortress's towering walls to drop stones and shoot arrows at their foes. The siege of Sacsayhuaman turned into one of the fiercest battles of that era. Spanish accounts say that capturing the fortress seemed nearly impossible due to its solid walls and strategic location. It took cavalry, steel weapons, and eventually fire for the Spanish to finally break through. Fall of Sacsayhuaman signaled the end of organized Inca opposition and ushered in a new era of Spanish rule over the Andes. But the intrigue of Sacsayhuaman goes beyond its role in the conquest. The precision in the stonework, the sheer scale of construction, and the advanced engineering know-how of its builders challenge what we often think about early American civilizations. Fortress was created by a society without written language, wheeled vehicles, or iron tools. Yet they achieved architectural feats that left even the Spanish conquerors in awe. Techniques used at Sacsayhuaman revealed the sophisticated knowledge held by the Inca Empire. They understood seismic engineering, making their structures resilient against centuries of earthquakes. They also developed clever ways to quarry, move, and shape huge stones, requiring the coordinated effort of thousands of workers. Water management systems served both the fortress and the city below. Cuscasi, idea of narrow, advanced hydraulic engineering skills. Archaeological digs have shown that Sacsayhuaman was more than just a military stronghold. It included homes, storage areas, temples, and ceremonial spaces. Well-known circular tower, Mucmaca, which the Spanish took apart, was likely a place for royalty or worship, not a fort. Whole area was like a small-scale version of the Inca universe, with specific zones for religious ceremonies and administration. Sacsayhuaman's cultural influence spread across the Inca Empire, and further, this fortress served as a template for other Inca structures, utilizing similar building methods and designs found in places like Machu Picchu. Recent studies have shown that Sacsayhuaman's history runs even deeper. Archaeologists discovered that it was built over older sites, potentially linked to the kill culture, which predated the Incas' rise. This long history hints that the spot held spiritual value for many Andean communities over the years. Questions also makes us rethink how technology and civilization connect, because achieved what many thought was impossible, even without the tech advantages that Europeans had. They found unique engineering solutions, set up systems to manage huge building projects, and crafted with precision that today's builders would envy. The significance of Sacsayhuaman expands our view of indigenous American societies and their skills. It shows that the technological and organizational feats of pre-Columbian cultures were far more advanced than early European writings indicated. This represents a unique root of human progress, one that yielded impressive outcomes through hard work, careful planning, and a deep knowledge of nature's materials and forces. Then there's Baalbek, Lebanon. In the summer of 1751, English scholar Robert Wood stumbled upon its ruins after months of travel through the Ottoman Empire, facing bandits, harsh conditions, and political chaos. He finally reached this isolated site. What he discovered there would turn European ideas about ancient engineering upside down. Standing before three massive stones, Wood recorded in his journal that he was witnessing incredible remnants from the past. This became the first thorough European description of what would evolve into one of archaeology's biggest mysteries. His precise drawings and notes ignited years of debate about how ancient builders moved and positioned massive stones, much larger than anything found in the Roman world. Intrigue grew when Wood realized these enormous blocks weren't just random ruins. They were key parts of a grand temple complex, showcasing the height of Roman architecture. Serious archaeological digs at Baalbek didn't kick off until the late 1800s, when German Kaiser Wilhelm II greenlit the first systematic excavations. In 1898, Otto Pugstein led a team to the site, ready to uncover and document the ancient structures. What they discovered over 7 years was even more astonishing than they had hoped for. This site revealed an entire sacred complex sprawled across more than 20 acres, and the Temple of Jupiter, constructed during Emperor Augustus's rule, was the largest religious building in the Roman Empire. Foundation featured the famous Trilithon 3 limestone blocks, each weighing between 750 and 800 tons, stacked 20 feet high. They fit together with such precision that you couldn't slip a knife blade between them. But the explorations unveiled something even more astonishing. Nearby, archaeologists found 3 additional blocks that were cut and shaped but never moved to the temple. The biggest, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighed about 1,000 tons. Later on, they would uncover an even larger block, coming in at around 1,242 tons, earning it the title of the heaviest stone block in the world. Archaeological efforts faced several hurdles. The site had been lived on for more than 2,000 years, with Islamic, Byzantine, and Crusader buildings layered over the Roman foundations. Carefully peeling back these later structures while keeping the archaeological details intact took a lot of careful work. They used smart techniques to keep a record of their findings, creating a visual history that still helps researchers today. Back in the 1970s, Friedrich Raget made key discoveries about how the construction happened. He found out that the huge Trilithon blocks weren't just stacked on smaller stones. Instead, they were built into the foundation right from the start. This challenged earlier beliefs that those heavy blocks had been added later or were repairs for older structures. The digs also showed clever engineering methods that explained how the Romans pulled off what seemed impossible. The quarry is situated a bit higher than the temple site, which meant they could easily move the blocks downhill using ramps and sleds. You can even see deep grooves in the stone where ropes and lifting tools were once attached. Romans had a methodical way of handling megalithic construction that combined thoughtful planning with creative engineering. Today's archaeological tools have unveiled even more about how they built things. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed the ancient roads where blocks were transported from the quarry to the temple. Plus, tiny examinations of stone surfaces have uncovered tool marks, showing the exact cutting methods used by Roman workers. All these findings point to sophisticated yet doable techniques that Roman engineers had at their disposal. Research has also shown just how many people were involved in this crazy project. Inscriptions discovered at the site refer to specific work crews and their leaders. Evidence suggests that hundreds of skilled stoneworkers, backed by thousands of labourers, dedicated decades to this effort. The level of organisation needed rivals today's construction projects, but it was entirely manageable for the Roman Empire in its prime. More recent finds have added fresh twists to the story. In 2014, archaeologists turned up a third enormous block in the quarry, even bigger than the stone known as the Pregnant Woman. This new block stretched 64 feet long and weighed over 1,200 tons, but was left behind partway through. This suggests that Roman engineers were really testing their limits, trying to move stones that were becoming increasingly massive. Grand Temple at Baalbek held deep religious meaning for its worshippers. This was where people honoured Jupiter Helipatinais, a blend of Roman and local Semitic gods. The sheer size of the temple complex was a clear statement of Roman power and commitment to the region. Those enormous stones were not just for looks, they had a purpose. They were meant to amaze visitors for generations. Ongoing studies keep unearthing new details about the site's past. For instance, excavations show that there was important construction before the Romans even arrived, hinting that the site was sacred long before their conquest. Finding older foundations beneath the Roman buildings suggests that this massive temple was built over earlier holy spots, a common practice in ancient times. The project's planning was impressive, with the entire complex designed as a cohesive architectural masterpiece. Massive stones were arranged to create specific visual effects. Terra-thin blocks, for example, were positioned to catch the sunlight, casting dramatic shadows and highlights that added to the temple's stunning look. Every detail of the construction was thought out to leave a lasting impact on anyone who visited. Advanced dating methods have shed light on when this construction actually started. Radiocarbon dating of materials found in the mortar indicates that it kicked off during Augustus's reign and stretched on for over 2 centuries. This grand undertaking involved many generations of craftspeople passing on skills and techniques through families. The mystery doesn't just stop at how they moved those giant stones. It extends to how they were placed so precisely. Trilithon blocks weren't just stacked, they fit together like a complex puzzle. Each stone was shaped to join with its neighbours at specific angles, creating a structure that has withstood earthquakes, wars, and the test of time. Modern engineering studies have shown that the Romans had the know-how to pull off such a feat. Computer models reveal that those massive stones could have been transported using wooden rollers, ramps, and clever lever systems. It wasn't fancy technology that made it all happen. It was more about careful planning, skilled workers, and organising hundreds of people over long stretches of time. But there are still plenty of mysteries. We don't know exactly how the huge stones were lifted into place. There are no Roman texts that detail the techniques used at Baalbek, and so archaeologists have to piece it together from what they find and compare it with other Roman building sites. The lack of detailed records adds to the site's mysterious vibe. Ongoing digs keep uncovering new information about this incredible feat. Every excavation season brings fresh finds, adding pieces to the puzzle while sparking more questions about what the ancient builders could do and why they did it. Now, picture this. You're sailing the Pacific Ocean and come across something truly amazing. A city that floats on water, with huge stone walls rising up from coral reefs. Welcome to Nan Mad, near Pompeii in Micronesia. It's one of the biggest mysteries in archaeology. How did ancient builders move and position millions of tons of basalt stones over the water to create this floating city? This isn't just about engineering, it feels almost impossible. We're talking about 92 islands held together by canals, made from basalt columns that can weigh up to 50 tons each. Some estimates say the entire place uses over 250 million tons of stone. The big question that has puzzled researchers for years is straightforward. How did they pull it off? One theory comes from local legends. According to the oral traditions in Pompeii, twin sorcerers named Olopar and Olipa used magic to build Nammadon. Tales say that massive basalt stones soared through the air, directed by mystical forces. While this might sound like a fairy tale, these stories have been passed down for over 1,000 years, consistently describing the same incredible idea, stones moving all on their own. But modern science wants practical answers. Many archaeologists believe in the raft transport method. They think the ancient builders got the basalt columns from Sakes Rock, a volcanic peak on the island's other side. They floated the stones on large rafts across the lagoon. The natural pillar-like shape of the basalt would have made it simpler to handle, and the rafts could have supported the heavy weight. But here's where the idea runs into trouble. The distance from the quarry to Nanalei is about 10 miles over open ocean and coral reefs. To carry 50-ton stones, they'd need huge logs for the rafts. But Pompeii's tropical climate doesn't have trees big enough for that. Even if they managed to build strong rafts, navigating through coral reefs with such heavy loads would almost certainly wreck both the rafts and the valuable stone. Another theory suggests they transported the stones over land. Supporters of this idea say they used logs, ropes, and a ton of human effort. They reference similar methods used by other ancient cultures, like how Easter Island's Moai statues were moved. The basalt columns might have been rolled along set paths, then loaded onto smaller boats for the last leg of the journey. But this theory has its issues too. The land between Sakes Rock and the coast is rugged and thick with jungle. Creating a transport route would have meant clearing miles of forest and building big earthworks to make a flat path. Archaeological digs haven't found any signs of such major landscape changes. Plus, the number of workers needed would be enormous. Some estimates suggest thousands over many years. Recent scientific studies are adding new layers to the discussion. Radiocarbon dating reveals that significant construction at Nammadol started around 1180 AD when the Silura dynasty rose to power. Chemical tests of the basalt confirm they came from Sakes Rock, but there's more to it. The builders chose their stones carefully, using only certain types of basalt. This shows they had a clear understanding of rock properties and were picking materials for specific structural needs. Now, a third theory is starting to gain traction. Some archaeologists think the construction was more gradual and planned than anyone realized. Instead of large-scale stone transport, they suggest the builders used smaller, easier-to-handle pieces and some advanced engineering techniques we don't completely grasp yet. Credible accuracy of the construction. Stones fit together so well that it hints at some advanced planning and perhaps lifting techniques we still don't understand. There's also the intriguing find of extensive underwater structures near Nanmal. Archaeologists have spotted basalt columns on the sea floor, leading to theories that parts of the complex were built when the sea was lower, or that maybe construction accidents scattered stones across the ocean floor. This suggests that building it was more complicated and probably more dangerous than we currently think. What makes Nanmal stand out isn't just the mystery of how it was built, but the precision of the final result. These artificial islands are perfectly arranged to form a network of tidal channels, offering protection and practical benefits for everyday life. This setup shows not just engineering talent, but a deep understanding of ocean dynamics and long-term planning. Discussion keeps evolving as new archaeological methods bring in fresh evidence. Ground-penetrating radar has uncovered hidden structures beneath the visible ruins, while underwater archaeology is mapping out the entire complex. Each new find adds more pieces to the puzzle and raises new questions about what ancient Pacific Islanders could do. Then there's the Sangsing Douai civilization in China. Some of the biggest archaeological finds happen by pure chance. A farmer digging for water unexpectedly strikes gold. Construction workers' shovel hits something that shouldn't be there. But few discoveries have been as astonishing as what occurred in rural China in 1929, when a simple drainage ditch led to uncovering one of the most enigmatic civilizations in history. One early spring day, a farmer named Yando Changeng and his son were digging an irrigation channel in their field near Guanghan City in Sichuan province, when their tools struck something hard in the figar. Not rocks, but smooth carved objects that sparkled after being buried for centuries. What they pulled from that ditch were jade artifacts like nothing ever seen in China before. Little did the farmer know he had just found the first clues to the Sangding-Di, Oe civilization, a Bronze Age culture that would upend everything archaeologists believed about ancient China. The jade pieces sat in the farmer's home for years, occasionally shown off to guests but mostly left untouched. It wasn't until the 1980s that archaeologists began to appreciate their importance. When formal excavations kicked off in 1986, what they uncovered was beyond anyone's wildest dreams. They found 2 huge sacrificial pits filled with thousands of bronze treasures that were unlike anything seen before in China. Items from that excavation appeared almost otherworldly. There were bronze masks with bulging eyes and huge ears, some measuring over 4 feet wide. There were also tall bronze figures with long faces and oddly mysterious looks. But the most incredible find was a nearly 13-foot-tall bronze tree, complete with birds perched on its branches and strange symbols all over its trunk. The level of craftsmanship was truly remarkable. These weren't just basic artifacts, they were sophisticated masterpieces made by skilled metalworkers. What made these finds so groundbreaking wasn't just their beauty, but also their uniqueness. The bronze masks didn't look like anything from known Chinese art traditions. Some of the faces had eyes that seemed to peer into another realm, while others were decorated in ways that hinted at religious or ceremonial. Style was so unlike other Chinese Bronze Age artifacts that some archaeologists doubted their Chinese origins. As the digging continued, it became clear that these weren't just random burials. They were deliberate sacrificial deposits. Artifacts had been intentionally broken and burned before being buried, hinting at complex rituals. Presence of elephant tusks, cowrie shells, and jade among the bronze indicated extensive trade connections over long distances. The elephant ivory was particularly puzzling since elephants hadn't roamed this area for thousands of years. This suggested that the Sangsing Duai people had a trade network reaching deep into Southeast Asia. Radiocarbon dating placed these treasures between 1200 and 1000 BCE during the time of China's Shang dynasty. But while Shang bronzes featured familiar motifs like dragons and phoenixes, the artifacts from Sangsing Duai displayed entirely different imagery. Sacred trees, massive masts, and standing figures pointed to a civilization with its own unique identity. Archaeological work ramped up significantly in the following decades. Excavations showed that Sangsing Duai was more than just a burial site. It was a bustling urban center. This ancient city stretched over 12 kilometers and was protected by huge earthen walls. Researchers found signs of specialized workshops, residential areas, and a complex system for managing water. Clearly, this was the capital of a kingdom known for its sophistication, which somehow slipped through the cracks of history. The most exciting discoveries happened recently. In 2019, using cutting-edge, ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists uncovered 6 new sacrificial pits near the original site. When digging began in 2020, over 500 new artifacts came to light, including pieces of what looks to be the largest gold mask ever found in China. The finds also included unique bronze vessels with new decorative styles, jade items in uncommon shapes, and even the earliest silk textiles ever discovered in southwest China. Today, theories about Sangsing Duai are still changing. Many archaeologists now think it was the capital of the ancient Shu kingdom, mentioned in later Chinese texts but never pinpointed. According to these old accounts, the Shu people were skilled in bronze work and ruled a thriving kingdom in what we now call Sichuan province. Davenant seems to back this idea, but many questions linger. The kingdom's sudden disappearance around 1000 BCE is still one of archaeology's big puzzles. The sacrificial pits seem to have been places for grand ritual destructions, where valuable items were broken and buried on purpose. Some think this might have happened during a political crisis, like an invasion or collapse. Others believe it was part of a planned move, where cherished objects were ceremoniously buried before people relocated. Recent scientific studies have shed new light on Sangsing Duai's technological advancements. Isotope analysis of the bronze pieces reveals advanced alloy compositions, showcasing skilled metalworking. Techniques used to cast those enormous masks and sacred trees were some of the most advanced of the ancient world. The jade objects discovered show they came from hundreds of miles away, highlighting the vast trade networks connecting San Duai to far-off regions. Ongoing digs keep surprising everyone. In 2024, archaeologists found what looks like a jade stone workshop filled with unfinished pieces and tools. This gives us the first clear evidence of how artisans in Sangsing Duai crafted their stunning works. This workshop is over 3,400 years old, pushing back when sophisticated craftsmanship started there. DNA tests on human remains found at the site indicate that the Sangsing-Due people were genetically different from other Chinese groups of their time, reinforcing the idea that they were a unique cultural community. Their unique art style, advanced technology, and sudden disappearance continued to baffle researchers trying to figure out how such a developed civilization could have thrived in isolation and then vanished entirely. Now, think about the Maya at their peak. Imagine a civilization bustling with life, cities, far as you can see, filled with towering pyramids breaking through the jungle trees, markets alive with traders bringing in goods from all over Mesoamerica, skilled astronomers watching the skies with a level of precision that rivals what we have today. This was the world of the Maya during their classic period, from 250 to 900 AD. They achieved heights that wouldn't be matched in the Americas for centuries. The Maya weren't just another ancient culture, they were math wizards who came up with the idea of zero all on their own. They created the most accurate calendar in history, predicting eclipses thousands of years ahead. Their cities, Tikal, Palenque, Caracol, and Calakmul, were engineering wonders, housing more people than many European cities back then. Recent findings suggest the Maya land may have supported between 7 to 11 million people at its height, making it one of the most populated ancient regions in the world. But then, something shocking happened. Around 900 AD, this incredible civilization began to fall apart. It didn't fade away slowly or get conquered by outside forces. Instead, it experienced a mysterious abandonment that left archaeologists scratching their heads for over a century. In just a few generations, the grand cities of the Maya were deserted. The ball courts grew quiet. Grand royal ceremonies wrapped up. Jungle vines started to reclaim the stone temples that had stood tall for over 6 centuries. To really grasp how shocking this decline was, we need to appreciate what the Maya accomplished. Their farming system was a true marvel of environmental design. They turned huge swaths of jungle into productive fields using methods that today's scientists are only starting to understand. With raised fields in wetlands, terraced hillsides, and clever irrigation, they managed to support millions in an area many thought couldn't sustain such dense populations. Political structure was just as intricate. Instead of one empire, the Maya world was made up of many city-states, each ruled by divine kings who claimed to be descended from the gods. These rulers engaged in grand wars, formed shifting alliances, and competed for glory through massive construction projects. Hieroglyphics on their monuments tell tales of royal marriages, military triumphs, and religious ceremonies that tied together a civilization stretching across modern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. But by 19 AD, the inscription stopped. The last dated Maya monument in the southern lowlands was carved in 99 AD at Tannina. After that, nothing. The great cities that had flourished for centuries were deserted one after the other. Archaeological findings indicate that this wasn't a slow decline. It was a rapid collapse that occurred over about 150 years. The mystery thickens when we note that the collapse wasn't the same everywhere. While the southern lowland cities were abandoned, Maya civilization thrived in the northern Yucatan for hundreds more years. Cities like Chichen Itza and Mayapan rose to prominence, just as Tikal and Palenque were engulfed by the jungle. This implies that whatever caused the collapse was specific to the south, not a disaster across the entire civilization. Recent studies point to several factors likely behind this downfall. Climate research shows that the heart of the Maya experienced severe droughts between 800 and 1000 AD. These weren't just ordinary dry spells. They were long stretches of little rainfall that would have crushed the agricultural systems that kept the bustling urban centers alive. Lake sediment cores from the area reveal big drops in water levels during this time. Mur changed their landscape so much that they built a fragile ecological system, clearing forests for WHTC. Food and farming wiped out much of the natural greenery. Without trees to hold in moisture and stop erosion, the land became more exposed to drought. Archaeological findings from places like Copan show signs of environmental strain, like worn-out soil and damaged watersheds. Warfare ramped up in the terminal Classic period as resources grew scarce. The detailed inscriptions from this time tell urgent tales of battles between city-states. The fight for limited resources caused trade networks which had supported the Maya for ages to fall apart. As farming output dropped and trade routes failed, the economic base of the Maya elite started to crack. Population pressures might have been what made them more vulnerable to these other challenges. Recent archaeological studies suggest that In some areas, Maya population density was pushing the land to its limits. When drought hit, there was no buffer. The agricultural system that once thrived couldn't support all the people relying on it anymore. Maya collapse fits into a wider pattern of civilization cycles, recognized by archaeologists globally. Complex societies often face quick growth, followed by swift decline when they overstep their environmental or social limits. The Maya downfall happened during a period of global climate change and social unrest that affected cultures from Europe to Asia. What makes the Maya collapse especially important is what it teaches us about how human societies relate to their environment. The Mer created one of the most advanced farming systems in the ancient world, but it turned out to be vulnerable to climate shifts and overuse. Their experience highlights how even the most developed civilizations can face rapid collapse when environmental and social pressures mix together. When modern engineers stumbled upon Derinkuyu, they were up against a real head-scratcher. How do you break down a structure that defies everything we think we know about building? This underground city housed 20,000 people and went 18 levels deep into solid volcanic rock. This ventilation system is so advanced that it still works perfectly after 1,500 years. To figure it out, they had to pull out all the stops in archaeology. The scientific exploration of Derinkuyu kicked off in the 1990s with ground-penetrating radar. Teams of geophysicists carefully moved their gear across the ground above known entrances, sending electromagnetic pulses deep into the earth. What they found was simply mind-blowing. The underground complex was much larger than anyone ever thought. The radar showed a maze of chambers, tunnels, and vertical shafts spreading out in every direction, some reaching over 85 meters down. But radar only gave them fuzzy outlines. To really get a grasp of the structure, researchers turned to 3D laser scanning. Teams crawled into the cramped passages, armed with portable LAR devices that shoot millions of laser pulses every second to create accurate digital maps. The scanning was slow and meticulous. Every chamber, every tunnel, every little carved niche had to be captured with millimeter accuracy. Resulting 3D models unveiled architectural details that earlier archaeologists had missed. Following analysis shook up basic ideas about what ancient builders could achieve. Using advanced modeling software, engineers calculated how much weight the carved rock chambers could hold. They realized that the ancient builders had a natural grasp of structural mechanics principles that weren't formally recognized until the 1800s. Everything from where they placed load-bearing pillars to the arch shapes of doorways and how weight was distributed followed top-notch engineering practices. Geotechnical studies highlighted the brilliance of their location choice too. The city was CAA, raved into a tough type of volcanic rock that formed from compacted volcanic ash, a material that was easy to carve with basic tools but toughened when it hit the air. Recent tests on core samples showed they could handle 15 to 20 megapascals of pressure, which is more than enough to hold up the massive underground structure. The ventilation system became the center of intense research. Scientists used advanced modeling to track airflow throughout the complex and found that ancient engineers had built a smart climate control system based on natural air complex 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 control system. Movement. Fresh air came in through over 50 ventilation shafts, with the deepest going about 55 meters up to the surface. Warm air from lower levels rose through these shafts, creating a natural circulation that brought fresh air into every chamber. To check how well the ventilation worked, researchers used tracer gases and air quality monitors. They discovered that even in the deepest areas, there was enough oxygen for people and carbon dioxide levels stayed safe. Agent builders had managed to figure out the right number and placement of shafts needed to ventilate a space for 20,000 individuals, which would be a tough challenge for today's HVAC experts. Dating when the construction happened called for various scientific methods. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials in sealed chambers gave the latest possible construction dates. Thermoluminescence dating on ceramic pieces helped pinpoint when different parts were carved out. Findings revealed that Derinkuyu was built in stages, with the oldest parts dating back to the 7th century AD during the Byzantine era. Analysis of plant remains in ancient storage rooms showed a complex agricultural system. Close examination of soil samples indicated there was grain storage, winemaking, and even raising livestock underground. Chemical tests on residues in storage vessels identified crops stored below ground, like wheat, barley, and legumes, that could feed the population during long stretches of isolation. Investigating the water system involved some hydrological engineering work. By measuring flow rates and analyzing the water sources, researchers found that the ancient builders had tapped into several aquifers, The main water supply came from a well reaching 55 meters deep. Extra water came from smartly designed systems that collected groundwater. Tests showed that this ancient water was incredibly pure, with minerals just right for us. Modern security studies revealed how clever the defenses were. Researchers used computer models to see how well the rolling stone doors, tight spaces, and dead-end tunnels worked. They discovered that these designs created natural bottlenecks, making it nearly impossible for invaders to get through. The ventilation shafts also served as a way to communicate, helping to defend the whole place together. Recently, ground-penetrating radar has uncovered that Daring Kuyu connects with other underground cities through a web of tunnels stretching for kilometers. We're still mapping this underground network, and new sections keep popping up. Some of these tunnels are 8 kilometers long, linking to the nearby city of Clay. The biggest challenge for scientists has been figuring out how these structures were built. By analyzing the marks left on carved surfaces, we see that ancient builders used simple iron tools, yet managed precision that rivals what we can do today. Experimental archaeology is trying to mimic those carving techniques, but recreating them takes a lot longer than what history suggests. Then there's Easter Island. Huge heads. They're an archaeological mystery that fascinates many. They've appeared in movies, inspired loads of documentaries, and fueled every conspiracy theory you can. Thinking about ancient cultures, from the book Chariots of the Gods in 1968 to the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. The Moai have been presented as proof of aliens, lost super civilizations, and unbelievable engineering. Those stone faces looking out over the Pacific have become symbols of the unexplained and mysterious. Popular culture has turned these statues into a kind of legend, portrayed as impossible puzzles that a lost civilization too advanced for the islanders could have created. Movies depict them as leading huge teams of workers and causing environmental disasters. TV shows have thrown out ideas about everything from anti-gravity to aliens. The internet is packed with theories about what the Moai are, how they were made, and how they got to their spots on the island. But here's the deal, popular stories and archaeological facts don't match up. The Moai aren't some alien mystery. They're actually well-documented cultural and religious symbols of the Rapa Nui people. Crafted between 1250 and 1500 AD, we have clear archaeological evidence showing exactly how, when, and why they were created. And the truth is much more amazing than any sci-fi story. The Moai were carved at one main site known as Rano Raraku, using stone tools called toki, which archaeologists have found plenty of. These statues aren't just heads peeking out of the soil. Most of their bodies are buried deep beneath layers built up over centuries. When the ground was dug up, it revealed intricate carvings, petroglyphs, and even stone carvings of ceremonial loincloths. The myth about the giant head started with early European visitors, who only saw the parts above ground. Once archaeologists began to dig in the 20th century, they found out that most Moai have bodies that go way down into the ground. Some are over 30 feet tall when fully uncovered, making them among the biggest stone sets of Persias in the world. These are creations of human hands, not alien tech. Common story that building these statues led to environmental collapse has also been questioned by new research. Evidence shows that Rapa Nui society was actually thriving while the Moai were being built. The island supported a population of 10,000 to 15,000, boasting advanced farming techniques, including rock gardens still visible today. The real environmental issues came later, mostly from European contact, disease, and the introduction of rats that wrecked the island's ecosystem. One of the biggest myths is about how they transported the statues. Movies and TV shows have suggested everything from levitating them to alien ships, but experiments by researchers Carl Lippo and Terry Hunt put that to rest. They showed that the Moai could be walked upright using a rocking motion guided by ropes. Experiments with concrete models showed that a small group could move a 10-ton statue across the island using just ropes and teamwork. This walking theory helped solve many archaeological mysteries. The statues along the ancient roads are mostly tall and narrow, perfect for this method. Quote, many of these statues were found tipped over, just as they would fall during transport. Rapa Nui oral traditions even mentioned that the statues walked to their spots, which archaeologists first thought was just a myth. Now, they see it as a piece of history. There's also a difference between myth and reality when it comes to the statue's purpose. They weren't mysterious markers or ancient tools for astronomy. Instead, the Moai were ancestral figures watching over the island's people. Each statue was carved to honor specific ancestors, which explains their unique faces despite looking similar. They were placed on ceremonial platforms called or, serving as gathering spots for religious events and community gatherings. Archaeological findings show the complex social structure needed for building the moai. Creating these statues required specialists, master carvers, transport teams, and skilled builders. Different styles of statues match different time periods and possibly different family groups. Other than being products of a lost civilization, the moai highlight the peak of Polynesian stone carving traditions that extend across the Pacific. The true importance of Easter Island goes well beyond the sensational stories we often hear in the media. The moai symbolize one of humanity's incredible achievements in isolation. A small population on the most remote inhabited island making monumental art that competes with the distraction of the earth, greatest from larger civilization. The engineering skills needed to quarry, carve, transport, and raise these giant statues showcase the advanced technical know-how of Polynesian seafarers. Recent archaeological discoveries keep adding to our understanding of this amazing accomplishment. Ground-penetrating radar has uncovered hundreds more statues still buried around the island. Stone tools have revealed the intricate trade networks that provided materials for crafting statues. Dating methods offer a clear timeline of when various statues were carved and erected. In North America, before European explorers ever claimed to discover the continent, there were already advanced civilizations. These societies created cities, built complex trade systems, and constructed impressive architecture from 100 to 400 AD during Europe's medieval times. The heart of North American civilization thrived in what's now Illinois. This was the era of the Mississippian culture. At its core stood Cahokia, a vast city larger than medieval London, and it wouldn't be matched in size by any North American city until Philadelphia in the 1780s. The Mississippian period, roughly from 100 to 1500 AD, marks the height of pre-Columbian life in North America. It was a time when agriculture flourished. Native American societies in the eastern US learned advanced farming techniques that sustained large populations. Maize, beans, and squash formed the basis for urban centers that could rival anything else in the world at the time. Mississippian peoples organized their communities around strong chieftains, rich religious systems, and far-reaching trade networks linking areas from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Within this vibrant landscape, Cahokia emerged as North America's first true city. By 1100 AD, at its peak, Cahokia held between 15,000 to 20,000 residents in its central area, with maybe another 50,000 living nearby. The city spread across 6 square miles and boasted over 120 earthen mounds, including Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas, towering at 100 feet and covering 14 acres at its base. Monk's Mound exceeded the Great Pyramid of Giza in size and served as the ceremonial and political hub of a complex society. But by 1400 AD, this magnificent city was deserted. The mystery of Cahokia's decline deepens when viewed alongside medieval North America. While European cities faced plagues, wars, and social turmoil, Cahokia had reached an urban sophistication that wouldn't be matched in North America for centuries. The city had well-planned neighborhoods, smart water management, and a huge central plaza that could hold thousands for religious and political events. But around the 13th century, Cahokia started to decline. Archaeological finds show that many Mississippian towns in the eastern US began shrinking, with people moving from big cities to smaller, spread-out communities. Cahokia was a continent-wide change, affecting Native American groups from the Great Plains to the Atlantic. Climate change seems to have played a big role. The warm medieval period that had helped farming thrive started giving way to the Little Ice Age around 1300 AD. Studies indicate that during this time, the Midwest faced harsher droughts and floods, making it tough to keep up the farming needed for larger populations. Recent scientific research sheds light on the tough environmental conditions Cahokia faced. By looking at sediment from local lakes, it appears that the people cleared large forested areas for farming and building, which led to more erosion and flooding. The archaeological records show signs of regular flooding that would have ruined crops and made parts of the city unlivable. The way Mississippian societies were structured may have made them especially fragile when confronted with environmental issues. They had powerful chiefs who managed surplus farming and complex redistribution systems. Crop yields dropped due to environmental stress. It could lead to a quick collapse of the entire system. Later findings in Cahokia's history reveal growing signs of social strain. There were fortifications built around the city centre, signs of violence, and a decline in the specialized crafts that had defined the city's prosperous period. The abandonment of Cahokia also mirrors larger changes happening in Native American societies across the continent. From 1300 to 400 AD, there were significant shifts in population and development. New political systems and shifts in trade routes began to change indigenous societies encountered by Europeans. After 1500, people from Cahokia didn't just vanish. They spread throughout the Midwest, taking their traditions and knowledge with them to new homes. The story of Cahokia has bigger implications too. Its decline happened during a time of global climate change that impacted civilizations all over, from the fall of the Anasazi in the southwest to the end of the medieval warm period in Europe. The 13th and 14th centuries brought widespread social and environmental turmoil. Cahokia's situation shows us that even sophisticated societies back then were not immune to environmental changes or social pressures. Now, let's talk about the Sea People. It all started with a war. Back in 1859, a French archaeologist named Auguste Marat stood in front of the huge stone walls of Medinet Habu, the mortuary temple of Pharaoh Ramses I near Luxor, Egypt. On those stones were hieroglyphs telling a wild story about mysterious invaders from the sea who had thrown the ancient world into chaos. But these weren't your regular hieroglyphs. They showed warriors with feathered hats, horned helmets, and odd round shields. They were unlike anyone the Egyptians had seen before. Marat had uncovered the first real proof of what would later be called the Sea Peoples, a group of maritime raiders who appeared in the Eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE, only to vanish into history as mysteriously as they came. The inscriptions at Medinet Habu named these strange groups the Peliset, Dai, Shalesh, Danuna, and Wesh. But instead of answers, those messages sparked even more questions. Who were these folks? Where did they come from? And what happened to the civilizations they confronted? Early archaeological digs in the late 19th and early 20th centuries began to piece together a clearer picture of destruction across the Eastern Mediterranean around p. 1200 BCE. Sites like Troy, Mycenae, and later Ugarit revealed thick layers of destruction from this era. Ancient cities that had thrived for centuries showed signs of violent endings, crumbling walls, burned buildings, and treasures buried in haste. Timing lines up with what the Egyptians said about the Sea People's attacks, hinting that these sea raiders played a role in one of the biggest collapses of civilization in history. A big discovery happened in 1929 when French archaeologist Claude Schaeffer started digging at the ancient city of Ugarit on the Syrian coast. What his team uncovered was a Bronze Age city captured in its last moments. Tablets they unearthed, scattered across palace floors, contained urgent letters asking allies for help against the raiders from the sea. One tablet, meant for the king of Cyprus, said, "Father, the enemy's ships are here. They are burning my cities and ruining the land." A city fell so fast that people fled without their most treasured belongings. Evidence from around the Mediterranean began to show just how widespread this Bronze Age Devil War Age collapse was. In Pylos, Greece, tablets written in Linear B talked about building watchtowers to keep an eye out for the sea raiders. In Cyprus at Enkomi, excavators showed there were 2 destruction phases in the 12th century BCE. Even places like Hattusa, the capital of the Hittites in what is now Turkey, showed signs of people leaving during that same time. The Sea Peoples weren't just a threat to Egypt. They triggered a crisis across the Mediterranean. But figuring out who the Sea Peoples were archaeologically was not easy. Unlike other ancient cultures that had unique pottery or architecture, the Sea Peoples blended into the archaeological findings. Egyptian reliefs at Medinet Habu depicted them with ships that had bird-headed prows and wielding specific weapons. Yet, these signatures are tough to find at excavation sites. The strongest clue so far has been the Pelisets, one group of the Sea Peoples mentioned by the Egyptians. Many scholars tied them to the Philistines noted in the Bible, who showed up in the southern Levant around 1200 BCE. Digs at Philistine sites like Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath uncovered a unique material culture that appeared seemingly out of nowhere. This included new pottery styles, architectural methods, and different eating habits, like eating pork. Recent scientific breakthroughs have transformed how we study the Sea Peoples, with a key discovery made in 2016 related to the Philistines. At the cemetery in Ashkelon, researchers got their first chance to look at the genetics of the Sea Peoples up close. A DNA study from 2019 revealed that people from the early Iron Age in Ashkelon had a lot of European roots, especially from southern Europe. This showed that at least some of these sea groups came from places outside the Eastern Mediterranean. They also looked at teeth from the Ashkelon burials. The chemical signatures in the enamel formed during childhood didn't match the local environment. has pointed to the fact that these individuals had spent their early years somewhere else before arriving in the Levant. When they analysed pottery influences, they noticed connections to the Aegean region, hinting at ties to Greece or nearby areas. But recent studies have added complexity to the idea that the Sea Peoples just destroyed everything in their path. Analysis of destruction layers shows that many sites were actually abandoned slowly over time rather than wiped out violently. Climate data suggests the Eastern Mediterranean went through severe droughts around 1200 BCE, which likely triggered population shifts and economic issues all on their own, without any military invasions. Today's research aims to understand the Sea Peoples as part of a larger picture of collapse rather than the sole reason for it. New digs at places like Telman at Ekron are uncovering how Sea Peoples set up new societies after the Bronze Age fell apart, bringing innovative techniques like ironworking and new farming methods into play. When scientists first found the rusty bronze pieces from a shipwreck in PE Mediterranean back in 1901, they faced a real puzzle. How do you figure out a 2000-year-old machine that's more intricate than anything that should have existed back then? Solving this required cutting-edge imaging techniques to turn those corroded bits of metal into blueprints for humanity's oldest known computer. Serious research into the Antikythera mechanism kicked off in 2005 with the launch of a special project. The challenge was obvious. The bronze fragments were so corroded and mineralized that regular archaeological methods couldn't dig through the surface. The team had their work cut out for them. Researchers wanted to look inside a complex mechanism without causing any harm. They needed non-invasive methods to uncover the intricate gear systems that had been hidden for centuries. Big breakthrough came with high-resolution X-ray computed tomography. With a special 450 kilovolt microfocus X-ray system, they could see through the corroded bronze and create detailed 3D images of what was inside. The CT scans showed things that the eye simply couldn't catch. A sophisticated setup of at least 37 bronze gears, some as small as coins, finely crafted with teeth that fit together perfectly. But that was just the start. The fragments held thousands of tiny Greek letters etched into the bronze, essentially forming an ancient user guide. These markings were hidden from view, buried under layers of corrosion and minerals. To uncover them, researchers turned to reflectance transformation imaging. This technique captures how light interacts with surfaces from various angles. By combining many photos taken in different lighting, they brought back to life text that had been lost for over a century. Analyzing each gear fragment was a detailed process. They used digital calipers to measure the spacing of the gear teeth with incredible accuracy. Then they applied polynomial curve fitting to figure out how many teeth were on the damaged gears. Gear ratios discovered matched ancient Greek astronomical cycles, perfectly ratios encoding the 19-year Metonic cycle, the 76-year Calippic cycle, and the intricate movements of known planets. The advanced imaging revealed that this mechanism was way more complex than anyone had imagined. The CT scans showed signs of differential gearing, a technique that wouldn't reappear for another 1,000 years in medieval Islamic devices. These gear trains could model the moon's elliptical orbit, even factoring in its varying speeds, showcasing a level of astronomical knowledge historians didn't think ancient Greeks possessed. The scientific study didn't stop at mechanical engineering. It also looked into the metal itself. X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy showed that the bronze had specific ratios of tin and lead, ideal for gear cutting, indicating that ancient craftsmen had a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy. The study uncovered tool marks that shed light on how ancient things were made. Turns out, the gears were shaped by a basic machine lathe, not crafted by hand like people thought. With new 3D technology, researchers have been able to create virtual models of the entire mechanism by analyzing the gear ratios from CT scans. They show how this device worked as an astronomical calculator. Just turn the crank, and it reveals the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, predicts eclipses, and even keeps track of various ancient Greek calendars at the same time. The investigation also dug deeper with inscriptions. Special imaging techniques brought to light a detailed user manual explaining how the device tracks lunar and solar eclipses, as well as the cycles of the 5 planets known to ancient astronomers. The manual indicated that the mechanism could forecast eclipses decades ahead, displaying this info on front and back dials with impressive accuracy. Still, there are some big gaps in our understanding of this device. About 2/3 of it is gone, probably lost to the sea or decayed over time. Missing parts probably contained extra gear trains for planetary motions, which researchers can only theorize about. It's still unclear how they calculated those complex gear ratios, as ancient Greek texts don't cover the advanced methods needed for such precision. But modern research is always pushing the limits of what we can learn from the remaining pieces. High-resolution CT scans are picking up fine details of the gear teeth that earlier scans missed, and smart software is piecing together missing gear trains based on mechanical needs in astronomy. Each new scanning method gives us more clues. The scientific exploration has also placed the mechanism in its historical context. The astronomical cycles found in the gear ratios match up with records from ancient roads, suggesting this device was made for a specific latitude. The eclipse predictions start around 205 BCE, hinting it was built during the peak of innovation in the Hellenistic period. Imagine finding a book that no one can read, not because it's written in a forgotten language, but because it uses a script that's never shown up before in human history. That's the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. This medieval text has over 240 pages filled with words in an unknown alphabet, strange drawings of plants that don't exist, confusing star maps, and naked women in green pools linked by complicated pipes. For more than a century, the smartest code breakers, linguists, and computer experts have tried and failed to unlock its secrets. One big theory is that this manuscript is a lost natural language. Maybe it used to be a dialect that faded away, or a made-up language created for a special Ria on. Supporters of this idea point out that the script, known as Voices, shows patterns like those in natural languages. It even follows Zipf's law, which means word frequency follows a predictable pattern found in all known languages. Studies using computers have shown that the manuscript's randomness matches real languages, not random nonsense or basic codes. Recent work by linguists at Yale has backed up the natural language theory. They've spotted grammatical structures in Voices that look like those in agglutinative languages, where you build words from smaller meaningful parts. There are patterns in a text. Certain letter combinations show up at the start of words, while others consistently appear at the end, hinting at prefixes and suffixes. Computer analysis also found that different sections of the manuscript use slightly different vocabularies, which makes sense if it's discussing various topics in a real language. But there are big challenges for the natural language theory. If Voices really was a language, it would be unlike any other out there. The script has only 20 to 25 characters, which is way fewer than most alphabets, yet it creates thousands of different words. The letter combinations follow very strict rules that feel more artificial than natural. Some sequences of letters show up way too often to be realistic. Imagine if every third word in English ended with the same 4 letters. It might be an elaborate trick meant to fool people who collect rare books. Back in 2004, computer scientist Gordon Rugg showed that you could create text similar to this using 16th century cryptographic tools called card and grills. These were tables with movable windows that mashed up syllable fragments to make fake language. According to this idea, the manuscript was a medieval con job, designed to look intriguing and valuable while being completely meaningless. Either So the Tape Library YouTube channel Revive manuscript was found with Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, who was known for his odd collections and often fell victim to scammers. Fancy illustrations might have been created to boost the book's appeal and make it seem even more mysterious. Carbon dating puts the vellum at the early 15th century, but that doesn't rule out the possibility that someone added the text later to create a fake ancient document. But the hoax theory isn't without its issues. Crafting this manuscript would have taken a huge amount of time and money. Back then, high-quality vellum cost a lot, and writing consistent, mysterious text over 240 pages could have taken ages. The illustrations, weird as they are, show a strong grasp of medieval art and plant drawing techniques. Plus, statistical analysis indicates the text is more intricate than what simple methods like grills could produce. A newer theory suggests that this manuscript could be a medical treatise written in Old Latin, with its odd look coming from an extreme form of medieval shorthand. In 2017, Nicholas Gibbs argued that the text is a collection of health remedies for women, with the abbreviations making it look confusing to today's readers who aren't familiar with medieval medical terms. This theory tries to make sense of the book's medical illustrations and its strange language. Medieval medical writings often used complex abbreviations to save space, and sometimes women's health remedies were kept secret in coded language. The theory claims that what seems like a lost language is actually just heavily abbreviated Latin, following old medieval rules that have been forgotten. Linguistic experts haven't found much to back up the abbreviation theory, Attempts to decode certain passages with medieval Latin abbreviations just haven't worked out. The letter patterns in the Voynich manuscript don't fit any known abbreviation systems, and the text stats don't align with abbreviated Latin. Nowadays, new ideas are coming from modern computational methods. Machine learning algorithms that analyze the manuscript suggest it could be a made-up language with its own grammar rules, or even an early kind of encryption using different cipher techniques. Some researchers think it might be a proto-language that shaped later language development, while others believe it could represent glossolalia, kind of religious speaking in tongues that was carefully documented. Now, let's talk about the Copper Scroll. Sometimes amazing discoveries pop up when you least expect them. On March 14th, 1952, French archaeologist Henri Cons was taking a close look around Cave 3 at Cumain, continuing the hunt for more Dead Sea Scrolls after some thrilling finds in the late 40s. In the low light at the cave's back, his team noticed something odd stuck in a small crevice in the rock wall. 2 rolls of rusty metal, green with age, stacked on top of each other. At first, these copper rolls didn't seem like much. Unlike the leather and papyrus scrolls that had grabbed headlines, these were too corroded to read and too fragile to unroll. Team carefully took them out and brought them to the Palestine Archaeological Museum in Jerusalem, adding them to a growing pile of scroll fragments waiting to be examined. Quote, "But what was hidden under that corrosion would turn out to be quite unique compared to the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Real breakthrough came 4 years later when they decided to open the copper rolls. The metal was so fragile that unrolling them wasn't an option. Any attempt would shatter the ancient copper. In 1956, the rolls made their way to Manchester University, where engineer H. Wright Baker had designed a special machine to cut them into strips. He used a precision saw with a cutting wheel only 3 mm thick. They carefully cut through the copper, uncovering Hebrew text that had been concealed for almost 2,000 years. What John Allegro and his team discovered was remarkable. Rather than the usual religious writings, biblical commentaries, or community guidelines found in other Dead Sea Scrolls, this copper scroll detailed a treasure map. It listed 64 locations, each pointing to caches of gold, silver, and precious artifacts scattered across the Judean wilderness. The numbers were mind-blowing. Over 200 tons of gold and silver were mentioned, making it the largest treasure trove ever described in ancient texts. When experts examined the copper scroll, they recognized it was unlike any other Dead Sea Scroll. Carbon dating and writing styles suggested it was created between 25 and 100 CE, aligning with the other scrolls. But this one was different. Instead of being made from leather or papyrus, it was crafted from copper sheets, almost like bronze. Hebrew used was also unique, featuring more everyday language and technical terms than the more formal style of the other scrolls. Scrolls' treasure locations posed a tantalizing challenge for archaeologists. It provided specific references, distances in cubits, landmarks like pools and tombs, and place names that might be pinpointed. Some entries were quite detailed, mentioning a spot beneath the eastern rampart with 600 bars of silver. Others were more mysterious, like clues about locations in the third course of stones or beneath an eastern-facing hill. John Allegro became fixated on the search for this hidden treasure, leading several expeditions to the Judean desert in the late 1950s and early 1960s. His team followed the scroll's directions, seeking out described landmarks and looking for the hidden treasures. They dug up numerous sites from ancient T-Page, ice stems to rock formations, but turned up nothing resembling the enormous treasure the scroll described. This lack of success led many scholars to doubt whether the treasure ever existed. Today, researchers are taking a more systematic approach to unlock the mysteries of the Copper Scroll. Today's researchers are using geographic information systems and satellite images to pinpoint the places mentioned in the scrolls. Most of these references are coming from around the Jerusalem area and the northern Dead Sea region. This focus has sparked new ideas about where the scrolls came from and why they were created. Recent studies of the language used in the scrolls have shed light on what they really are. The Hebrew dialect found in the text matches what people were likely speaking in 1st century Palestine, especially in Jerusalem. It even includes specific architectural terms that hint the writers were very familiar with the temple complex and its surroundings. Some experts think the scroll could be detailing treasures hidden from the temple just before it was destroyed in 70 CE. Archaeological work has also looked closely at the physical characteristics of the scroll. Tests on the copper sheets showed they were made using techniques from the 1st century. It's strange, though, that they chose copper over leather or papyrus. Metal would have been great for keeping information safe for a long time, yet using copper would have been quite expensive, making it a costly way to record details. The way the scroll was found adds to the intrigue. Unlike other Dead Sea Scrolls, stored in jars or wrapped in linen, this copper scroll was just placed in a niche that was already falling apart. This hints it could have been hidden at a different time or for different reasons than the others. Some scholars think it might have been stashed away by people escaping Jerusalem during the year's first Jewish revolt, while others believe it could have been a working document for temple officials. In today's world of archaeology, few ancient artifacts grab attention like Roman docahedrons. These mysterious 12-sided bronze objects are all over social media, spawning YouTube videos with millions of views and Reddit threads filled with wild ideas. Internet loves a good mystery, and docahedrons are perfect for that. They're eye-catching, puzzling, and just the right size for clickable headlines. Popular culture has turned them into symbols of ancient sophistication, fueling theories that range from advanced technologies to secret uses. People are drawing wild comparisons between surveying tools and alien gadgets, turning them into the archaeological version of a viral meme. This online buzz has led to a flood of amateur theories. Video creators have suggested these could be ancient multi-tools, cosmic calculators, or even devices for time travel. Posts on social media often claim they're evidence of advanced Roman tech that outshines today's engineering. Pinterest boards are filled with images of these docahedrons, paired with captions about secret ancient wisdom and unexplained technologies. These objects have become symbols of the idea that ancient cultures held knowledge that modern science has forgotten. But the truth from archaeology tells a different tale. Since the first docahedron was found in 1739 near Aston, England, about 130 of them have turned up in northwestern Europe. They aren't just scattered everywhere, they're mainly clustered in areas that match today's Britain, Netherlands, Germany, and parts of France. And most of these date back to the 2nd to 4th centuries AD, right during the peak of Roman rule in those northern regions. The actual evidence paints a far more ordinary picture than what the internet theory suggests. Most of these docahedrons measure between 4 and 11 centimeters across, crafted from bronze using standard Roman metalworking techniques. They have 12 pentagonal faces with holes of various sizes, small knobs at the corners where the faces meet. Chemical tests reveal they're made from regular Roman bronze alloys, no magic or mystery there. The misconception about their enigma partially comes from what popular culture overlooks. Roman docahedrons have never been found in Rome or the Mediterranean core of the empire. They don't show up in Roman art, writings, or technical manuals. No Roman author mentioned them, hinting they weren't deemed important enough to document. This silence in geography and literature clashes with the idea of advanced imperial technology. Archaeological context gives us key insights that online theories miss. Docahedrons are usually found in civilian areas, not military ones, and often linked with craft or home life. Many have been unearthed alongside other bronze items like brooches, tools, and decorative pieces. The way these items are spread out echoes other Roman British crafting traditions seen in the provinces. This points to local creativity instead of a one-size-fits-all imperial style. One common myth is that they're incredibly complicated and precise. Online videos make it sound like the Romans needed some advanced math skills to create docahedrons. But truth be told, these shapes were pretty familiar in Roman times. Roman mathematicians learned from Greek traditions, and docahedrons were simply one of the 5 basic solid shapes described by ancient thinkers. Making a 12-sided figure wasn't a big leap in technology, it was just basic geometry. Recent digs have provided simpler explanations for their use. The best theories focus on practical functions that fit with how they were found and used in homes. The graduated holes hint that they might have been tools for working with fibers, possibly for crafting cords, chains, or even something like knitting. The different sizes suggest they could be used with various materials. Tests in experimental archaeology have explored how these tools might have been used. Trying to use them for surveying hasn't worked well and hasn't given consistent results. As dice, they don't roll straight because of how they're weighted. However, when it comes to fiber arts, things look promising. Those holes can help make cords of a uniform thickness, and their shape and weight work well for specific textile techniques. So, the real importance of Roman docahedrons isn't some mysterious ancient technology, but rather what they tell us about innovation in the Roman provinces. These objects showcase local artisans adapting Roman metalworking skills to meet their own regional needs. They highlight the creativity and craftsmanship that thrived in Roman Britain and Gaul, showing how provincial makers found their own ways to tackle practical issues. As for the Phistos disc, When researchers tried to decipher it, they faced a unique challenge. Unlike other ancient scripts that have thousands of examples, they only had one artifact, a single clay disc covered in 241 puzzling symbols arranged in a spiral. This meant using every scientific method available to gather as much information as possible from this one piece of evidence. The investigation would involve computational linguistics, statistics, material science, and digital imaging technology all working in harmony to reveal secrets that have been hidden for over 3,000 years. They kicked off the scientific investigation with basic questions about the disc's physical traits. Found in 1908 at the Minoan Palace of Photo in Crete, the disc puzzled archaeologists right away due to its unusual manufacturing technique. Unlike other ancient T-scripts that were hand-carved, each symbol had been stamped into wet clay using individual seals or stamps. A Christine-like method was groundbreaking for the Bronze Age, potentially making this disc the first example of movable type printing ever discovered. Looking closely through microscopic analysis, they uncovered key details about how the symbols were stamped. High-resolution photography and scanning electron microscopy showed that each symbol came from a separate stamp, as evidenced by tiny differences in depth, angle, and pressure. Some symbols even showed signs of overstamping, where one stamp overlapped another, shedding light on the order in which they were created. Clay used was local Cretan material, fired at temperatures typical of Middle Bronze Age pottery techniques. Digital imaging technology played a game-changing role in the investigation. Researchers created ultra-high-resolution scans of both sides of the disc, allowing them to measure each symbol's size and position accurately. They even used 3D modeling to discover subtle details not visible to the naked eye, including slight dips and raised areas that offered insights into how the symbols were stamped. Thanks to this digital documentation, they could analyze the disc without having to handle the fragile original repeatedly. Statistical analysis became a key tool for decoding the symbol system. They catalogued all 45 unique symbols, examining how often each one appeared and how they were positioned. The frequency analysis revealed that some symbols popped up way more often than others, following patterns we see in natural languages rather than just decorative art. The most common symbol appeared 19 times, while 18 symbols showed up only once, creating a distribution curve that resembled letter frequencies in known alphabets. They also looked into how symbols combined into groups. The investigation found that some symbols often showed up together, while others never did. This pattern hinted that the symbols might stand for syllables or words instead of just single letters. The spiral layout split nicely into 61 groups, marked by vertical lines, which likely indicate where words break up, offering more insights for analysis. To measure the information within these symbols, researchers used entropy measurements. Computational linguists calculated these levels and compared them to known languages and random symbol systems. The results indicated that the information density matched that of meaningful text, not just pretty patterns or random design. However, the entropy levels were lower than most alphabets, hinting at either a syllabic system or a limited vocabulary. The investigation also compared these findings with other Bronze Age scripts. Researchers meticulously lined up the Phistos symbols against Linear A, Linear B, and Cretan hieroglyphics, using digital databases and pattern recognition tools. While they did find some visual similarities, nothing matched up directly, confirming that the Phistos disc was its own unique writing system, not tied to any other known Minoan scripts. Machine learning added a fresh analytical edge. Algorithms designed to spot language patterns dug into the symbol sequences, looking for grammatical structures and repeated patterns. Hidden Markov models helped identify likely word boundaries and recurring elements that could be prefixes or suffixes. Neural networks explored the visual similarities between symbols, making family trees of related signs. Recent advancements in computational analysis have focused on modeling sequences. Researchers borrowed techniques from bioinformatics, which were first used for DNA analysis, to spot recurring motifs in the symbol patterns. These methods uncovered certain structural patterns that bolster the idea of meaningful language, rather than random designs or artistic flair. The results paint a complex picture of communication during the Bronze Age. The printing technique reveals a sophisticated grasp of how to create reproducible symbols, possibly pointing to scribal schools or organized administrative practices. Properties of the text hint at a writing system that's got grammar. But since the text is pretty short, we can't fully understand it using regular language techniques. There are still big gaps in what we know about the disk. Just one example doesn't give us enough information for the statistical methods we need, which usually work better with larger samples. Plus, without bilingual text or clear pictures, we can only guess what each symbol means. The unique way the disk was made doesn't match anything else from the Bronze Age, making it tough to fit it into the bigger picture of technological advances, like the Baghdad battery. Could it be that ancient folks figured out electricity 2,000 years before Alejandro Valter invented the modern battery? That's the big question around one of archaeology's most talked about artifacts, the Baghdad battery, found in 1936 near Baghdad. This collection includes a ceramic jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod. When you put them together with an acidic liquid, they can create a tiny electrical current. But did ancient Mesopotamians really know about electricity? Or are we just seeing our modern ideas reflected in simple old containers? One bold theory suggests these items were functioning galvanic cells used by ancient people to electroplate gold and silver onto other metals. Wilhelm Koig, a German archaeologist who recognized their potential in 1938, thought that the Parthians and Sasanians used groups of these devices to achieve the fine gold layers seen on many artifacts from that time. According to this idea, ancient metal workers figured out the principles of electrochemistry on their own, grasping electrical concepts way before they were rediscovered in the 18th century. Supporters of the electroplating theory have backed it up with modern experiments. When we make copies of the Baghdad battery and fill them with acidic solutions like vinegar or lemon juice, they do generate electric current. Tests show they can produce between 0.8 to 2 volts, which is enough to do basic electroplating on small items. People point to the fine gold work in ancient Mesopotamian artifacts as proof that such precision could only have come from electrochemical methods, not the old technique of fire gilding. The theory behind electroplating hits some big snags when it comes to archaeology. Even after years of digging, no ancient workshop with multiple batteries for electroplating has been discovered. Plus, tests on artifacts that are thought to be electroplated just don't show the signs needed to prove it was done that way. They're likely just gilded using older methods instead. Techniques like fire gilding and mercury amalgamation were already popular long ago and could easily replicate what we think is electroplating. Then there's the second theory, which takes a simpler view. It suggests these objects were just for storage. Archaeologists have noticed similar ceramic jars were commonly used in the ancient Near East to store items like scrolls and religious texts. So the copper cylinder and iron rod could just be clever scroll holders, keeping delicate papyrus or parchment safe from moisture and bugs. Copper would act as an extra shield, while the iron might help support the rolled document. This idea makes sense with the context of the findings, since the Baghdad battery was unearthed in a spot known for storing important documents. Other sites in Mesopotamia appear HK. Ave also revealed similar copper-lined containers, though these didn't have iron rod. The size of the copper cylinder fits right for scroll storage, and its snug design would keep moisture at bay. But the storage theory does have its doubts. Why go to such elaborate lengths just to keep documents safe? The mix of copper and iron creates ideal conditions for a galvanic reaction, which seems a bit too coincidental if they weren't meant for electricity. Pointed end of the iron rod and how the copper cylinder is built seem made to enhance electrical contact rather than just for storing documents. Recently, a third theory popped up, suggesting these devices had medical or spiritual uses. Some researchers think they were used for early electrotherapy, delivering mild electric shocks for pain relief or to create religious experiences. Various cultures have texts that talk about using metal objects and acidic solutions for treatments, hinting at early electrical medicine. The idea is that priests or healers harnessed the electrical sensations from these tools as part of their healing rituals or mystical experiences. I had this idea of this theory gets a bit of backing from evidence across different cultures. For example, ancient Egyptian writings mention using metals and acids for treatment. Meanwhile, traditional Chinese medicine utilized different metal objects for healing as well. The Baghdad battery, which could generate a mild electrical current, might create sensations similar to those described in these old medical texts, hinting at potential healing uses. However, there's no direct proof connecting the Baghdad battery to medical practices. Archaeological context doesn't really support its medical use, and no similar devices have turned up in known ancient hospitals or healing spots. So the theory is mostly speculation, leaning more on the device's electrical properties than on solid archaeological proof. Modern science is still working to clarify what these mysterious objects are all about. Techniques in material science have confirmed that these artifacts are real and date back to the Paphion period between 250 BCE and 224 CE. Chemical tests show that the devices faced exposure to acidic substances, but this might just be from natural groundwater, not intentional use. Then there's the Shroud of Turin, which emerged during a time in medieval Europe that was crazy for holy relics. Quote, by the 14th century, the trade in sacred items was booming, one of the biggest businesses in Christianity. Churches were in fierce competition to grab pieces of the true cross, fragments of saints' bones, and anything tied to Christ's passion. It was an era when pilgrimage routes were all the rage, and cathedrals rose and fell based on the allure of their holy treasures. The lines between faith and commerce were getting really blurry. In this climate of relic obsession and religious enthusiasm, one of history's most debated artifacts came to light. The Shroud of Turin. It first popped up in 1357 when it was shown off at a church in the small village of Lair in north-central France. And that timing? Well, not a coincidence. It was right at the peak of the medieval relic trade in Europe. People were slowly healing from the terrible Black Death that had wiped out a third of the population just 10 years before. In their desperate quest for signs of God's favour, they turned to sacred relics for comfort and economic gain. This was the backdrop for the mystery of the Shroud, set against the backdrop of 14th century relic culture. At the time, medieval Europe was overflowing with supposed pieces of Christ's burial cloth, bits of the crown of thorns, and vials of holy blood. The fall of Constantinople to Crusaders in 1204 unleashed a wave of Byzantine relics into Western markets, resulting in both real artifacts and a booming trade in fakes. The Shroud emerged amid this explosion of relic collecting, where the desire for genuine items far outpaced supply, and it was often hard to tell devotion from deception. Quote, yet the Shroud of Turin was different from the usual medieval relics. Instead of being just another piece of bone or cloth that could be easily faked, it displayed a mysterious full-body image that couldn't be easily explained. Medieval documents described a faint impression of a crucified man, with wounds matching the gospel account of Christ's death. This image was subtle, looking more like a photographic negative than the bold religious art of its time. Even then, the Shroud sparked debate. In 1389, Bishop Pierre Dari of Troyes wrote to Pope Clement III, claiming it was a forgery and pointing out the artist behind it. Still, despite doubts from church leaders, the Shroud continued to draw pilgrims and generate income for its owners, eventually ending up with the House of Savoy in the 15th century. Looking at the bigger picture, the Shroud fits into the broader patterns of religious and social change during the medieval period. The 14th century saw a growing focus on the humanity of Christ, with people drawn to practices highlighting his suffering. The Shroud met this spiritual need perfectly, offering a tangible link to Christ's crucifixion, going beyond abstract theology, provided believers with visual proof of the gospel stories, making the tale of the crucifixion feel immediate and real. The relationship between faith and science is a complex one, shaping centuries to come. Back in medieval times, Christianity started to wrestle with observation and the natural world, setting the stage for later clashes between belief and scientific inquiry. At this crossroad was the Shroud, a religious piece that seemed to welcome scientific examination while pushing the limits of what people knew back then. When modern science finally took a look at the Shroud, things only got murkier. In 1988, radiocarbon dating tests from 3 labs placed its origin between 1260 and 1390 CE, right when it first popped up in history. This seemed to back up the idea that it was a medieval fake, supporting Bishop Darcus's accusations from the 14th century. But as scientists dug deeper, they found layers of complexity that the forgery theories just couldn't explain. The way the image formed is still a mystery, not paint or dye or any art medium we know of. Cloth even has real blood on it, and the details of the image show an anatomical accuracy that suggests a deep understanding of the effects of crucifixion. So, even if the Shroud does come from medieval times, its creation must have involved methods or situations that science today can't replicate or completely grasp. The Shroud of Turin forces us to rethink not just religious authenticity, but also our view of medieval society. Whether it's a true relic or an elaborate fake, it highlights the fascinating blend of faith, commerce, and technology in medieval Europe. It shows a world where religious devotion sparked inventive breakthroughs, and the quest for genuine spiritual experiences created markets for both real artifacts and clever tricks. Then there's the Yonaguni Monument in Japan, a discovery that happened by chance. Just like many remarkable archaeological finds, In 1986, Kihachiro Aratake, diving tour guide, was checking out the waters near Yonaguni Island in Okinawa, looking for new spots for tourists to see the local hammerhead sharks. Down at about 25 meters, something caught his eye through the clear Pacific waters, huge stone structures, completely unlike anything he'd ever seen before. What Artok found that day was truly extraordinary. One of the most debated underwater discoveries in archaeology emerged from the ocean floor, what seemed like stepped pyramids, terrace platforms and carved stone blocks appeared, arranged in neat geometric patterns. The biggest structure stretched around 50 meters long and 20 meters wide, with walls towering up to 8 meters high. These formations looked intentionally built, complete with straight edges, right angles, and what seemed to be stairs, roads, and drainage channels etched into the stone. When it was first discovered, Japanese researchers jumped into action. Marine geologist Masaki Kamura from the University of the Ryukyus began systematic underwater surveys in 1987. Over the next several decades, Kamura and his team mapped the whole area, uncovering not just one structure, but a series of formations scattered across hundreds of meters of seafloor. They used underwater photography, sonar mapping, and detailed measurements to document what they believed were the remnants of an ancient civilization. Kamura's work revealed signs that indicated human involvement. They spotted what looked like carved faces, including a formation that resembled a human head with clear facial features. They also found straight-edge cuts in the rock that looked too precise to be natural, and holes that seemed to be made for supporting wooden structures. Most intriguingly, they unearthed carvings that resembled hieroglyphs on some of the stone surfaces. Research expanded into detailed surveys that created three-dimensional maps of the whole site. These studies illustrated how the different structures were laid out and how water would have flowed through the channels when the area was above sea level. Kamura's team also compared their findings with known archaeological sites, discovering similarities between Yonaguni's features and ancient structures found in Japan and across the Pacific. Yet these archaeological discoveries sparked controversy within the scientific community. In 1997, geologist Robert Schoch from Boston University conducted his own investigation of the site. Schoch, who previously drew attention for his work on the Sphinx's age, came to very different conclusions about Yonaguni. After looking closely at the rock formations and how they've weathered over time, he figured that the monument was probably a natural creation shaped by tectonic shifts and erosion. Schoch's study focused on the sandstone in the Yonauni Formation. He noticed that the rock breaks along predictable lines due to its structure, forming the straight edges and right angles that Kamura thought were signs of human work. Who worked and joined, contended that the step-like shapes fit with how sedimentary rocks break down naturally, especially under marine conditions. The investigation broadened to examine changes in sea levels for the area. Research indicated that the Yonauni region was above sea level during the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, when global sea levels were much lower. This timing is key to the ongoing debate. If the structures were man-made, they'd have been constructed while the area was dry land, ranking them among the oldest human creations known. Current research is still weighing both sides, using a variety of scientific methods. Advanced sonar mapping and underwater robots are producing clearer images of the formations, while geological surveys are trying to figure out if these features could have come from natural processes alone. Some researchers have discovered signs of tool marks and deliberate alterations on the rock surfaces, while others highlight similar natural formations from around the region. Recent studies have also zoomed in on how this site connects to known archaeological sites on Yonauni Island. Above-ground digs have uncovered ancient stone tools and pottery shards, hinting at human activity on the island for thousands of years. Some argue these discoveries bolster the idea that ancient peoples could have worked on the underwater structures when they were still above water. Conversation about Yogun's origins has grown beyond just geology and archaeology. It now includes exploring ancient technologies and building methods. Experimental archaeology has been trying to see if the precise cuts and large-scale constructions visible at the site could have been made using Stone Age tools and techniques that ancient people had access to. The underwater city of Dwara in ancient India was a place built on stories. For over 3,000 years, epic tales like the Mahabharata and Ramayana have shaped Indian culture, handing down stories about brave kings, divine figures, and magnificent cities across the land. Among these legendary places, Dwara shone the brightest, known as the Golden City of Lord Krishna. It was depicted in ancient texts as a marvel of city design, with palaces, lush gardens, and bustling harbours that could compete with the great cities of the past. For a long time, these stories were seen as just myths, beautiful tales reflecting deeper truths rather than actual history. But the mystery of Dwara lies at the crossroads of legend and reality. The Mahabharata tells us that Krishna built the city as his capital after leaving Mathura, creating a stunning metropolis on India's western coast. Ancient writings say Dwara was constructed on land that had been reclaimed and boasted advanced harbour facilities and infrastructure, supporting a huge population. Importantly, the epic narrates that, right after Krishna died, the whole city sank beneath the waves of the Arabian Sea. This tale situates Dwara within the grander story of ancient Indian civilization during what scholars call the late Vedic period, around 1600 BCE. This time was marked by significant city development in northern India, with cities like Hastinapura and Cambodia emerging as key political and trade hubs. Archaeological finds from this period show impressive skills in city planning, metalworking, and sea trade, the very skills needed to construct the Dwara described in ancient texts. The search for Dwara underwater started in the 1980s, when marine archaeologist S.R. Dar Rao from the National Institute of Oceanography began explorations off the modern coast of Dwaraka. From 1983 to 1990, Rao led 12 major underwater missions, uncovering stone structures, walls, and artifacts lying beneath the Arabian Sea. Discoveries revealed semicircular, rectangular, and square stone foundations, ancient anchors, and pottery shards that hinted at long-term human life and maritime activity. Researchers uncovered a fascinating pattern of settlement that stretches over thousands of years. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from the site shows dates from as early as 3000 BCE all the way to 1500 CEE. This indicates that people lived in the area without interruption for a very long time. Underwater structures reveal different stages of construction, suggesting that this site was built up, torn down, and rebuilt many times throughout its history. When you look at the big picture of Indian Ocean trade routes, it makes perfect sense that Dwarka is where it is. The site sits right at the meeting point of major sea routes that connected ancient India to places like the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. Archaeological finds from the area include beads from Mesopotamia, Roman coins, and pottery from different parts of the Indian Ocean, showing strong trade links. This maritime focus aligns well with what the Mahabharata says about Dwarka being a port city. Plus, the finds at Dwarka tie into the patterns of climate change that impacted the entire region. Studies show that sea levels along the Indian Ocean coast have fluctuated a lot over the past 5,000 years, ultimately exposing and submerging coastal areas. The back and forth of being underwater and then re-emerging matches what ancient texts describe, confirming geological changes in the area. Today, researchers are using advanced tools to dig into the site's rich history. Ground-penetrating radar has uncovered more structures still hidden under the seafloor. Chemical analysis of artifacts has shed light on ancient manufacturing techniques and trade routes. Side-scan sonar mapping shows just how extensive the underwater ruins are, spanning several square kilometers. The discoveries in Dwarka do more than just support ancient texts. They show that early Indian civilization had impressive maritime skills much earlier than we previously believed. There's evidence that complex urban planning, advanced metalworking, and widespread sea trade were established in the region by at least 2000 BCE, pushing back our understanding of Indian Ocean trade and urban development significantly. This site also reveals how ancient societies thrived in these waters. People have adapted to challenges from their environment, especially with rising sea levels and coastal flooding. Different phases of construction show that the people of ancient Dwarka rebuilt their city multiple times to keep up with the changing coast. They came up with engineering methods to keep their connection to the sea strong, even when nature pushed back. Now picture this. You're diving and spot an incredibly straight line of huge stone blocks on the ocean floor. It looks like an ancient highway. That's exactly what 3 divers came across in 1968 near North Bimini Island in the Bahamas, stretching over 1,600 feet under 15 feet of clear water. These blocks are rectangular limestone stones, neatly arranged in 2 rows. The find ignited one of archaeology's biggest debates. Is this a sign of an ancient civilization or just an unusual natural phenomenon? Most exciting theory links the Bimini Road to the legendary lost city of Atlantis. It picked up steam because this discovery seemed to match something predicted by Edgar Cayce, a famous American psychic known as the Sleeping Prophet. Back in 1938, Casey had said that parts of Atlantis would emerge near Bimini between 1968 and 1969. When the underwater formation was found in September 1968, believers thought it confirmed his vision. Supporters of the Atlantis story point to some fascinating details about the stones. They're mostly the same size, around 10 to 15 feet long, and lined up in neat rows. Some even look like they were cut with sharp edges, with flat surfaces that seem too orderly for nature. There's also a curve in the formation, hinting at deliberate design rather than random geological events. Plus, the stones appear to fit together with smaller rocks placed in between, a technique used in ancient building. The Atlantis theory gained further backing from other underwater finds in the Bahamas. Researchers have discovered what look like more submerged structures in the area, including circular formations and stone platforms that some believe indicate ancient construction efforts. Timing lines up with periods of lower sea levels during the last ice age, when this area was dry land fit for building. Still, the mainstream scientific community isn't buying the idea of an ancient civilization here. Geologists say the Bimini Road is actually a natural formation called beach rock. This is limestone that forms when beach sediments get cemented together by calcium carbonate. Ozones, where fresh water meets salt water, creating the right conditions for rocks to form quickly. This natural formation explanation clears up many features that look artificial. Beach rock generally forms in parallel bands along old shorelines, which fits the linear arrangement of the stones perfectly. The process creates natural cracks, turning them into rectangular blocks with straight edges. When sea levels rose after the last ice age, waves broke the beach rock into the blocky shapes we see today. Scientific studies back up the natural formation theory with strong evidence. Core samples from the blocks show they have the usual beach rock composition, layered with sediment and calcium carbonate cement. The minerals match other confirmed beach rock found across the Caribbean. Microscopic analysis shows bits of beach sand, shell fragments, and other materials typical of natural coastal deposits, not quarried stone. Another theory suggests that the blocks might be artificial, but not from ancient times. Some researchers think these blocks could be ballast stones dumped by ships over the last few centuries, or leftover materials from modern harbour projects. This idea explains their uniform size and layout without needing ancient civilizations or strange geological happenings. The ballast theory has some backing from historical records, noting that the Bahamas were a key shipping route back in the colonial days. Ships would often dump ballast stones when they picked up lighter cargo, and those stones usually ended up piled neatly on the seafloor. The rectangular shape and even size of the Bimini blocks match quarried ballast stones used in 18th and 19th century shipping. However, the ballast theory does face some big challenges. The sheer number of stones, thousands of blocks, raises questions. Covering such a large area suggests a huge amount of ballast from several ships. The way everything is lined up looks far too neat for just random cargo dumped anywhere. Plus, the blocks show no signs of metal tools or modern quarrying techniques you'd expect from later construction. Recently, underwater archaeology has tried to settle these questions through careful investigation. Side-scan sonar mapping has uncovered that this formation is made up of several parallel lines of blocks instead of just one road. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found inside the rocks indicates they're between 2,000 and 4,000 years old. But those dates tell us when the beach rock formed, not when anything might have been built. Now, let's talk about the Plain of Jars in Laos. When scientists first tried to understand this mysterious site, they hit a tough problem. How do you study over 2,100 giant stone vessels scattered across land, still littered with unexploded bombs from the Vietnam War? What the solution? They had to come up with new ways to do archaeology. They combined advanced dating methods, drone tech, and non-invasive imaging to carefully uncover the secrets of this fascinating place. Safety was the first step. Much of the Plain of Jars was still tainted by landmines and cluster bombs, making traditional digging incredibly risky. Researchers from the University of Melbourne and Massey University created plans using ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry to find both the buried jars and any explosives before starting any work. This focus on safety changed how archaeology can happen in post-conflict areas. For dating, the team relied on optically stimulated luminescence (OSL) dating. This technique measures when sediment grains last saw sunlight, giving key insights into when the huge jars were set in their spots. They gathered sediment samples from underneath the jars at various sites, carefully taking materials that had been hidden away since the jars were placed. The lab analysis involved exposing those samples to controlled light while measuring their response. Quartz and feldspar crystals emit bright signals, The process of OSL dating showed some amazing results. The sediments found under the jars at Site 2 dated back to possibly the late 2nd millennium BCE. This pushed back the timeline for this fascinating culture by centuries. It turns out, the Plain of Jars is one of the earliest megalithic traditions in Southeast Asia, happening around the same time as similar cultures building monuments in Europe and other parts of Asia. Alongside the luminescence dating, radiocarbon tests on organic materials found in and around the jars added more chronological details. They looked at charcoal, bone collagen, and other organic bits using accelerator mass spectrometry. This gave dates mostly between 500 BCE and 500 CE. This range suggested the sites were used for a long time, with various phases of burials that stretched across nearly 1,000 years. The investigation moved forward, with advanced imaging technologies allowing researchers to document the sites without digging too much. High-resolution drone photography created detailed 3D models of the jar fields. This helped the team analyze how things were laid out from above. The aerial views revealed patterns that were hard to see from the ground, showing how the jars lined up with natural features and ancient trails. Ground-penetrating radar surveys added crucial details about what was hidden underground. Radar scanners found that many sites had far more jars than what was visible, with some completely buried under layers of soil. The radar also uncovered stone structures, possible burial features, and signs of past human activity near the jars. Findings from excavation at Sites 1, 52, and others offered new insights into ancient burial customs. Digging carefully revealed that the jars were used mainly for burials, with human remains later moved to nearby ceramic vessels or simple pits. This secondary burial practice involved elaborate rituals where bodies decomposed in the large stone jars before the bones were ceremonially relocated. Experimental archaeology has played a key role in uncovering how jars were made and transported. Researchers found the quarries where these jars were crafted, and they discovered evidence of impressive stoneworking skills. By examining the tool marks on both the finished jars and the quarry walls, they figured out that iron tools were used and that there was careful planning involved in the jar-making process. They even ran transport tests with replica jars to learn how to move vessels that weighed up to 6 tons across tough terrain. Studying the chemical makeup of the sandstone gave insights into where the jars came from. Using a method called detrital-zircon UBB dating, researchers could trace individual jars back to their original quarries. This revealed a complex web of jar production and distribution. Some jars had traveled over 25 kilometers from their source, showcasing advanced organizational skills and possibly indicating that they were crafted by specialized artisans. Recently, scientists have been looking at the bigger picture surrounding these jar sites. By analyzing pollen from sediment cores, they recreated ancient environments and saw how climate and plant life shifted during the time the jars were in use. They also studied human remains to learn about the diets of ancient people and their movements, uncovering connections between different jar sites and broader regional interactions. The latest research has even used machine learning to analyze how jars are spread out across the landscape. This computational approach has highlighted patterns, such as suggesting that the sites weren't just placed randomly, but likely followed specific cultural or religious ideas. These investigations keep revealing more about the intricate planning and cultural importance behind these ancient structures, showing how modern science can shed light on the complex social and religious systems of prehistoric societies in Southeast Asia. Take, for example, the stone spheres of Costa Rica. When Steven Spielberg was looking for an ancient mystery for Raiders of the Lost Ark, he chose these fascinating spheres. The memorable scene of Indiana Jones escaping a gigantic rolling boulder introduced millions to these enigmatic artifacts, turning them into symbols of ancient intrigue. Since then, the spheres have appeared frequently in documentaries dealing with lost civilizations and theories of alien visitors. People talk about unexplained phenomena all the time. Shows like Ancient Aliens suggest these might be signs left by aliens. Then there are internet theories saying they come from the lost city of Atlantis, or that they show some old technology we just can't grasp. This idea has built up a whole mythology around the spheres, making them seem perfect and shrouded in mystery. You'll find online videos claiming these spheres are incredibly round, almost mathematically perfect, something we couldn't replicate without today's technology. Social media posts love to label them as impossible artifacts that challenge what we think about ancient people. They've come to symbolize the belief that ancient cultures had knowledge we've forgotten, feeding into bigger stories about lost wisdom and buried archaeological truths. Quite different, the stone spheres were actually found in the 1930s and 1940s by workers from the United Fruit Company clearing rainforest for banana plantations in the Banner plantations in the 7th Wees Delta, over 300 off cording, ranging from tiny ones just a few centimetres across to massive ones over 2 metres wide, weighing up to 15 tonnes. These spheres were made by the Diquis culture, a pre-colonial society that thrived in southern Costa Rica between around 700 and 1530 CE. Excavations have shown the true placement of these spheres. Contrary to what popular media claims, they weren't just scattered randomly. Instead, they were deliberately placed within the ceremonial and living areas of Diqui villages, on stone bases, and aligned with the homes of important people. These spheres represented power and status in a sophisticated chieftain society that managed trade routes between the Pacific coast and inland areas. And the story of their perfect roundness, that falls apart when you look closely. While the spheres are indeed quite round, they aren't perfectly spherical. Most show slight variations that reflect their handcrafted nature. The larger ones may deviate from being perfectly round by a few centimetres, which is totally within the skill of the craftsman, but far from the mechanical precision that's often claimed. Archaeologist John Hoops and his team have uncovered how Diqui artisans actually made their spheres. These spheres were carved from local rocks like gabbro and granodiorite, using simple stone tools. Evidence from quarry sites shows how workers transformed rough boulders into smooth round shapes through a careful process of breaking and grinding. It took a lot of skill and time, but there was no secret technology involved, just the knowledge passed down from master stoneworkers. Myths surrounding these spheres also don't match up with reality. While some theories suggest they were arranged according to the stars or used as astronomical tools, the archaeological evidence shows they were placed based on the practical needs of DQI and Mars. The spheres marked key areas within villages, set boundaries, and connected living spaces to ceremonial sites. Modern research has shed light on what these spheres really meant for pre-Columbian Costa Rican society. Diquis culture belonged to the Chibchan-speaking peoples, known for their impressive goldwork and stone carving techniques in the Americas. These spheres were the height of their sculptural art, created through teamwork among skilled craftsmen. They also served as lasting symbols of social identity and control over land. The spheres reveal the intricate social structure of Quiz chieftains, but the labour needed to carve and move these monuments shows a society with surplus workers, specialised jobs, and a clear hierarchy. Their distribution across the land indicates the boundaries of different chiefs and a display of wealth and power typical of these ancient cultures. Recent archaeological work has shifted focus to understanding the spheres within their original cultural context, instead of viewing them as isolated puzzles. Excavations at sites like Finca 6 have shown how these spheres fit into a larger picture, connected to living spaces, ceremonial areas, and burial sites that reflected the political and religious life of the Diqui people. Sometimes the most astonishing findings surprise us when we least expect it. In 1927, a Peruvian archaeologist named Tibio Mejia Chespe was out hiking in the desert hills near Nazca. He was just doing a usual archaeological survey. But as he climbed up to overlook the vast desert below, he spotted something incredible. There were long, straight lines carved into the desert floor, so huge and precise that they seemed impossible to make without a way to see them from above. He was seeing the first scientific look at what would turn into one of archaeology's biggest mysteries. He thought they were ceremonial roads, not realizing he was only seeing a small part of a massive artistic work that spanned over 450 kilometers. These weren't just random lines, they were part of an entire collection of geoglyphs. There were huge figures of animals, plants, and geometric shapes that stretched for over 300 meters, all hidden from anyone walking on the ground. It wasn't until the 1940s that American historian Paul Kosok began to fly over the Nazca Plateau and see the full picture. From up high, it was clear that the desert held not just the lines Chespe had found, but hundreds of figures hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, condors, and even whales, along with incredibly complex geometric patterns. They made these geoglyphs by removing dark stones from the surface, revealing the lighter soil underneath, which helped preserve the images for over 1,000 years. It was picked up even more when German mathematician Maria Ricci joined Kosok's work in 1946. For 50 years, Ricci focused on mapping, measuring, and protecting the Nazca lines. Using simple tools like a broom, measuring tape, and a ladder, she documented hundreds of figures and came up with theories about their astronomical importance. Her detailed work showed just how precise the lines were, with some stretching for kilometers in straight paths across the desert. Systematic archaeological digs have given us vital clues on how these lines were made. The Nazca people, who thrived between 100 and 700 CE, creating these geoglyphs by carefully removing the dark pebbles that covered a desert, exposing the lighter earth beneath. The stones that were taken out were stacked along the edges of the lines. This created low walls that helped keep the designs intact. Thanks to the dry climate and little wind, many of these lines have been well preserved for over 1,500 years. As archaeologists have uncovered more evidence, our understanding of these lines has changed a lot. One popular theory is that the lines functioned like an astronomical calendar. They supposedly pointed to significant celestial events, acting as a giant observatory to track solstices, equinoxes, and key constellations. While some alignments with the stars have been confirmed, many lines don't match up with celestial events, suggesting there's something more going on. Recent studies have shifted toward looking at how these lines might relate to water and fertility ritual. Many of the geoglyphs sit close to underground water sources or old irrigation systems. This has led researchers to think the lines might have been part of ceremonies to ask the gods for rain in this dry landscape. Plus, the figures of animals often represent creatures linked to water-like marine animals that symbolize the life-giving ocean. A major breakthrough in studying the Nazca came with the use of AI. In 2019, a team from Yamagata University teamed up with IBM to use machine learning to analyze satellite images of the entire Nazca area. This AI scanning found 143 new geoglyphs in places that archaeologists had examined for years. The technology could spot tiny differences in color and texture that people might overlook. Then, in 2024, the research team used even more advanced AI deep learning systems over the whole UNESCO World Heritage Site. In just 6 months, creepy geoglyphics, nearly doubling the known figures and speeding up discoveries by 16 times compared to traditional methods. These new finds included images of parrots, cats, monkeys, killer whales, and human figures that had been hidden despite years of study. Ongoing research is showing us that the Nazca lines stretch far wider than we ever thought. The landscape stretches far beyond the main plateau, reaching into nearby hills and valleys, highlighting that this was likely a sacred area. Research on organic materials found under these lines shows that the construction happened over many centuries, with different designs emerging at various times in Nazca culture. Now, let's talk about the Kat Shabib Wall in Jordan. Why would an ancient civilization build a 150-kilometer stone wall in the desert? This wall is one of the Middle East's biggest archaeological puzzles. It runs 93 meters through tough desert land and features 100 watchtowers and many smaller structures, making it the longest linear archaeological site in Jordan. Despite its impressive size and clear significance, experts disagree about its purpose, who built it, or even when it was made. One leading idea suggests that the Katabib served as a defense built by the Nabateans, an Arabian trading group that dominated this area from the 4th century BCE to the 1st century CE. Supporters of this theory notice that the wall is well placed to control access to rich highland areas from the eastern desert. The many watchtowers would have acted as an early warning system against raids by nomadic tribes, while the wall would have provided a strong barrier for attackers. Nabateans were known for their building skills, so they had the ability to create such a large project. Backing the defensive idea, the wall's design shows some clever features. The watchtowers are evenly spaced and have clear lines of sight to each other, creating a connected surveillance system. Originally, the wall's height, around 12 meters, was enough to thwart mounted raiders, forcing them to dismount and making them easier targets. The local limestone blocks were stacked without mortar, similar to other fortifications made by the Nabateans across Jordan. But the defensive theory also has its problems. Some parts of the wall seem surprisingly weak for a military structure. Many sections are just single-thickness walls that could have been easily broken through by aggressive attackers. Plus, the watchtowers don't have the heavy fortifications you'd expect from a serious defensive wall. The wall appears in defensive structures, but many show no signs of being occupied for long. What's strange is that the wall doesn't take the most sensible path for defense. It skips right past several key passes and natural choke points where a barrier would be most useful. Another theory suggests that the wall acted like a fence, marking the boundary between settled farming areas and lands used by nomadic herders. In this view, the Kat Shabib marked where intensive farming ended and permanent settlements began. It created a clear line between these two lifestyles. All could have helped avoid clashes between farmers and herders over land use. with the watchtowers serving more as administrative posts rather than military ones. Support for the pastoral boundary theory comes from how the wall aligns with different ecological zones, roughly traces the line between fertile agricultural land and drier areas suited only for grazing. Historical and ethnographic evidence shows that these boundaries were common in the ancient Middle East. They were needed to settle conflicts between communities that farmed and those that moved around. Walls' relatively low height make sense for keeping livestock in check rather than for military protection. However, this theory has its own issues. The sheer size of the construction seems way too much just for marking a boundary. Building a 150-kilometer wall would have needed huge resources and labor and unlikely investment for simply keeping track of grazing land. Plus, the strategic placement of the watchtowers hints at a purpose beyond just boundary maintenance. The wall's complexity suggests it was meant for something larger than just managing livestock. A third idea that's come up recently proposes that the wall was used to control trade routes instead of serving defensive or pastoral roles. The Khachub's location along major caravan paths connecting the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean could have made it a customs barrier. Monitoring and taxing the valuable incense and spice trade, watchtowers would have kept an eye on caravan activity, while the wall directed merchants to specific crossing points where taxes could be collected. This fits well with the Nabateans' known role in desert trade. Their wealth came from controlling trade routes, and the Khachub's position would have given them a significant advantage. Merchants travelled between Arabia and the Mediterranean. The wall was built during the height of that trade, creating a strong economic reason for such a big project. But recent scientific methods have questioned when the wall was actually built. Luminescent dating done in 2018 showed dates from the 1st century BCE up to the 8th century CE. This means the wall could have been constructed much later than anyone thought. If it was built during the Byzantine or early Islamic times, it likely had different purposes beyond just controlling trade. Some researchers think the Byzantines put it up to manage Arab tribal movements in the 6th to 7th century CE, as the empire dealt with increasing raids from nomads. Others believe early Islamic leaders built it to define borders during their rapid expansion. We've traveled through thousands of years of human history, looking at ancient temples and mysterious artifacts that still raise many questions. Each of these mysteries is a piece of the big puzzle of human civilization. They remind us that even with all our modern tools and knowledge, our ancestors can still surprise us. The ancient builders have vanished, their methods low, time, and the true reasons behind their creations remain buried in stone and clay. Yet, what they built still stands, as quiet witnesses to human skill and creativity. As archaeologists keep digging and new discoveries come to light, one fact is clear: beneath our feet, tucked away in desert sands or hidden in jungle ruins, lie answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask. Earth holds all its memories and shares its secrets little by little.